joint special meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council. Roll call, please.
We'll start with Planning Commission. Commissioner Anderson is not here at the moment. Commissioner Carranza.
Here.
Commissioner Heath.
Here.
Commissioner Hughes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Here.
Vice Chair Keene will be joining us in a little bit, and Chair Vanden Eyck.
Here.
Then we have Councilmember Borbo.
Here.
Councilmember Darris.
Here.
Councilmember Funk.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Here.
And Mayor Moreno.
Here.
All right.
All right, thank you. So as we get started, just a couple of comments. This is our joint, again, Planning Commission City Council meeting for our general plan scoping. And we have several folks from MIG here who are going to lead us through this process. I want to note, number one, 3 hours seems like a long time. It will go by like that. And so we want to make sure we get everything in that we need to and keep things moving. So for us, officials who can talk a long time, all 12 of us, I'm sure, are pretty adept at that. Let's make sure that we're not repeating, like we're just kind of getting the things in there that we need to. If somebody's already said what you wanted to say, you can just say ditto and on to the next thing so that we make sure we get in everything that we need to tonight. Secondly, and this is especially for our attendees to note, the chat feature is working this evening. Okay, so somebody will be monitoring chat and we will bring that into the public conversation. What I would ask our council and commissioners is to not be in chat yourself responding to people. We have that being taken care of. So let's not have side conversations with the public that everybody else doesn't see, but that will be taken care of. So with that, I am going to hand it over to, I believe, Laura. And Laura, if you want to introduce yourself and your team.
Thank you, Mayor Moreno. My name is Laura Stetson. I am a principal with the planning firm of MIG. Our headquarters is in Berkeley, but I am based in Pasadena and have had the pleasure in my adult life to spend a lot of time up and down the Central Coast. And we are just tickled pink to be able to come to Atascadero and work with you and your community to envision, to look toward the future. The city has not done a comprehensive general plan update for about 20 years. That's about the time frame that most cities use for their general plan program. And so this is a chance to think big. And what we're asking you tonight is to not focus on the here and now, but to focus on the future and to help us decide what needs to go into the work scope for the general plan to ensure the most pressing priorities of the city are addressed as expressed by the decision makers, and also hearing from the public tonight. And so we're looking to find out the best ways, number one, to reach out to the community throughout this general plan program, to dig deep, to be broad, to get all of the voices out and to be heard. So that is one key thing that we're going to ask you tonight, is to help us figure out the best way to reach out to all members of your community. And then also to decide what goes into the general plan in terms of the topic areas. There are certain things that my colleague Dan Amsden is going to explain have to be in a general plan, but it's a open book. You can put whatever you want to in there, whatever's important to guide the community over the next 20 years. With me this evening are key members of the MIG team, Dan Amsden, who will be the project manager, Noyola, who works very closely with us, not just on engagement, but Noe is a planner by education. And so he knows just a lot about the community and a lot about planning. And then also Sasha Ragland, who's going to be helping us this evening take down the notes to make sure that no voices are unheard, and to make sure that we capture everything using a really cool tool that I think you'll all enjoy seeing once we get underway. I don't know if a planning staff, Phil, if you or any of, or Lorelei wanted to give any introductory remarks before we get underway and turn the meeting over to Dan. You'll hear all of us speak tonight. I'm sorry, I neglected to mention Ashley Knott from EPS, who is part of the team as well. She is our economist. And she will keep us all on the straight and narrow as we go through this program. And we know from the session that you had this afternoon, the many important things that we need to consider from a market and economic and fiscal sustainability standpoint. Phil, I saw both you and Lorelei turn your speakers on. So if you if you want to fight each other for the microphone, please do.
Yeah, well, just real quick, just again, wanted to introduce MIG Consultant Group to a City of Atascadero. And just want to remind everyone, this is really step 1A of our general plan update. This is the session to scope what we will be doing. So not going to get really into the weeds tonight, but really here's some general comments. And Lorelei and myself will be leading this project. And any comments, Lorelei, before we hand it off to MIG?
No, I'm just happy to have MIG on board. We went through a great process, got some great proposals, and MIG was the clear team to help us through this process. And it's going to be a great process and a great collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorelei. With that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dan Amsden.
Thanks, Laura and Lorelei. It felt nice to see everyone this evening. Good evening, council and commissioners, as well as the public I know is joining here this evening. I'm going to give just a quick, about 10-minute presentation, kind of building from the general plan briefing book that we sent out to commissioners and council members ahead of the session, but just kind of a little bit of background on what is a general plan, but also why it's really important to communities, and start to get in sort of this process that we're about to embark on over the next couple of years. And as Phil and Laura mentioned, tonight we don't need to go into discussing or solving policy or issues or items. We're gonna have 2 years to do that with the community. Tonight's really gain understanding of the process we're about to embark in. And we have a series of questions for all of you to really start a discussion on key opportunities or challenges facing the community, the engagement process, and these different components or topics we wanna make sure are addressed fully in the scope of work for this project and process over the next couple of years. So I'm just going to screen share here real quick and jump into this sort of background presentation, or kind of general plan 101. Here's just the agenda overview today. Quick presentation, and like I said, we'll get into these discussion components that are in the agenda you all received as well. So really thinking about this general plan process, starting from the colony days back in the 1800s, and really Atascadero has always been really organized around good design, but an intentionally planned community as well. And the planning has really led to a lot of good growth over the years, and especially along Highway 101, and the expansion of 101 led to the community that we know of today. But as we get into this general plan process, it's really an important opportunity and a great opportunity to think boldly about the future, as Laura mentioned. Most communities only jump into general plan updates every 20 or 25 years. So these are a bit of a rare thing, but it's really an opportunity to sort of step back a little bit and think about the future vision of the city and the community. And what does the city want to become? What are some of the assets that we can build upon and take further into the future? What are some other challenges around a range of topics, whether it's access to parks or economic development and festivals, but also public facilities and roadways, and all of these components that comprise the city are really part of this process that we're about to embark on. And it leads to sort of the first part of this, of what is a general plan. And in short, it's really the blueprint or the constitution for all land use decisions, development decisions, resource conservation, safety. It is a very important document to the city. And the purpose of general plans is really, one, probably its most important purpose, is to frame the community's vision for how the city should grow or change for years to come. And this is land uses, but also infrastructure, economic development, community services. But in turn, the document takes that vision and outlines policy. And this policy then relates to planning commission decisions, council decisions, EIRs as well. So there's a strong importance to the general plan as not only sort of this constitution or blueprint of growth, but really as the high level legal document for the city. And so this diagram just kind of shows how the general plan relates to everything else probably most of you are familiar with on a city level. So if we think of it as a pyramid, the general plan is the top of this pyramid. It's the overall policy document guiding essentially all decisions, but specific plans, zoning, design guidelines, these fall under the general plan and need to be consistent with the general plan, as do subdivision maps, conditional use permits, variances, all the way down to building permits, grading permits, other actions. And the way general plans are or should be thought of is they are more long-term, where as you go down this pyramid, other actions are more short-term in nature. But general plans, as their name suggests, are intended to be more general. And the details on how you implement it get further refined through these different types of documents. And I should note, the city has a general plan, but also the state requires every city and county to have a general plan. So as part of those requirements, the legislature over essentially the last 40 to 50 years has added some requirements to what is included in a general plan. But back to the importance of a general plan, over 20 different types of approvals or actions that the city takes must be consistent with the policy and guidance of a general plan. And you can see here's a list of it. And as part of the governor's office of planning and research, is one of the agencies that sort of oversees general plans, they prepare guidelines for types of things that need to be included, but it largely falls within 4 key categories. General plans are required to be comprehensive, so address a range of different topics from land use, economics, open space, long-term planning horizon. So this is why most cities or counties update them every 20, 25 years. They intentionally have a long-term vision, so the policies stay consistent, and then growth or change is consistent with the policies. They need to include an identified planning area. It could be bigger than the city limits, or it could be the same as city limits, but as part of the process is to define the planning area. But probably the most important thing in a general plan is it needs to be internally consistent. So if one chapter or policy provides specific guidance, other policies cannot be in contradiction to that one. So everything within a general plan needs to be consistent. And that's a big piece of it. So mandatory elements, and these can also be thought of essentially as chapters. And again, this is back to state guidelines. There needs to be a land use element, so identifying how land uses can be used, or how land can be used, excuse me, and what's the distribution of those land uses. So usually in a map and some other standards. A circulation element, how will people move around the community, as well as goods and other services. Housing element, which the city recently completed, because that's on a little bit different timeline from other components of the general plan for other state requirements, but addresses affordable housing needs and future housing projects specifically. An open space element related to open areas, areas of preservation, parkland as well. Conservation element, which really gets to resource conservation. Usually they're kind of similar or combined with open space elements, but there's some different requirements. Safety, and this can be human created hazards or natural hazards like flooding and wildfires, do need to be addressed as part of the general plan. Noise also gets its own specific element, and this is the adverse effects to noise from things like freeways, airports, or ways to try and mitigate that. And more recently, the state also requires environmental justice to be addressed, especially if there are identified environmental justice communities within a jurisdiction. So this is the current general plan that the city has, and its organizational structure and some of the guiding principles or framework is a little different from that list I just showed. And that's because cities have the discretion to organize their general plans however they like, as long as the topics are addressed. So a few sort of recent topics or recent legislation that's found its way within general plans. The state does require circulation elements to include a plan for a balanced multimodal transportation network. So bike lanes, sidewalks, bus transit as well. And the city has discretion on how to do that. It just needs to be addressed within the plan. Addressing climate change as well, and this is through several different statutes, but finding ways to reduce greenhouse gas emission and other state requirements do find their way into general plan requirements as well. Environmental justice, as I mentioned, which is essentially the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, incomes, with respect to the development or implementation of projects. So it really gets into hazards or hazardous sites, industrial sites next to disadvantaged communities. And then, while not actually a legal requirement of the state, healthy communities and ways to increase community health is really starting to become a part of a general plan program. And the best part about a general plan update, and I'm a general plan practitioner, so I'm maybe biased, is while there are certain things that need to be addressed by state requirements, there is a lot of flexibility local jurisdictions can do on what they want to include or address. And this really provides an opportunity to have a pretty robust discussion about the specific needs or specific policies that are unique to Atascadero. And that's really the great part about a general plan update program, is really having this broad community discussion about the future. So I want to give just a little bit of background and overview on this and pass it back to Laura, because the bulk of our discussion tonight is really having discussion with all of you around some of these scoping elements of the plan.
Thanks, Dan. And no, there will not be a test later on what the different required elements are of a general plan, because it's going to include what you want it to include. It's going to be up to us to make sure that it complies with state law and addresses everything that is important to Atascadero. The bulk of our meeting tonight is to respond to 4 broad topic areas. We want to ask you questions about looking ahead. What are the things that are the most pressing issues that Atascadero needs to address as part of this general planning program? We want to spend about 45 minutes asking you, who in the community should we talk to? We'd like to start to get a detailed list together of not only who and what groups are there that we might not think of beyond the usual suspects, but how best to talk to everybody in Atascadero, not just community workshops, but can we have coffee clatches, or can we go to the PTA? Can we go to Rotary? Can we go to all of the different groups? And so we want to hear from you. And Noe is going to lead that part of the discussion. We're also going to ask how you would like the council and commission to be part of this general plan program. Regular check-ins, do you want to form some type of subcommittee, advisory committee? And Noe will also lead us through that discussion. Then we're going to conclude with questions about the desired outcomes of the general plan and the process to answer a lot of the deep questions that this project will pose to the community. And Ashley will lead you through a discussion about what to look for in terms of digging deep into economic development, into market conditions, into the fiscal considerations that need to be considered as part of the land use element. We're also going to ask you about what you want this general plan to look like. Is it going to be a paper document, or do you want this to be an interactive online general plan that can also serve as an economic development tool? And we'll also, from an economic development standpoint, ask about the environmental impact report. Believe it or not, an environmental impact report can serve many functions, not just disclosing what the effects might be of a proposed project. And so we'll ask you about that. In the agenda, we had set aside a suggested time period to talk about each of these major topic areas. And we'll stick to that as much as we can, but we don't want to stymie any discussion. We want to make sure that we get all of the queries answered this evening. And Mayor Moreno, what we had talked about previously is that the structure of this portion of the meeting tonight will be facilitated discussion. And my colleagues Noe and Ashley and Dan might chime in some. We'll start with the key questions. We'll have discussion from the Planning Commission and the City Council, then turn it over to the public. Depending on how many members of the public we have this evening, I'm doing a quick check here. We've got 33 participants on the call this evening. I'm going to guess that about half of that is staff and the council and commission. At your pleasure, we can either have people raise their hand and ask questions, or we can have them put their questions into the Q&A. When we'll kind of see how that works, and Mayor Marino will ask you for guidance on that when we get to that portion of the discussion. So we'll close each topic area and then have another brief presentation or key up the discussion and go to that topic area. If you feel after about 90 minutes you need a break, please let us know. As the mayor indicated, 3 hours is going to speed by. We know you've had a long afternoon already. I hope everybody got some sustenance between 5 and 6. But we do want to be respectful of the need to take a break and stretch your legs or whatever. So we'll look to you to see whether or not we need a break about halfway through or 2 hours in. Before we get underway, do any of the council members or commissions have any questions about how we're leading the meeting this evening? I'm not seeing any. Yes, Ms. Carranza, Commissioner Carranza.
Yes, hi. I wanted to just get a little bit of a context as far as the pace for the year ahead in relationship to what we're going to be doing today, just to kind of inform me tonight.
Commissioner Carranza, your broadband connectivity, we missed part of what you said. Try turning off your camera and let's see if that improves so we can hear your entire question.
Okay, I'll try again here.
Thank you.
So yeah, I basically was just gonna look for how are we pacing ourselves with other meetings this year that might, I guess, inform me of how high level thinking we're getting today versus other rooms for meeting up this year. Does that make sense, this question?
It does. As Dan indicated, the meeting this evening is really to define a process. We're not, and to decide and define issues at a fairly high level. We're not looking for any solutions tonight. We're brainstorming, but most specifically, our takeaway from the meeting this evening are two key takeaways that the MIG team is looking for. Number one, the scope of the community engagement, how and who do we talk to? And two, what needs to be the contents of the general plan? Those are really the two key things. The contents meaning, are we just looking at those 8 components or elements that Dan referenced, or are there things that are unique and important to Atascadero that we want to be included in this general plan? As a for instance, you currently address historic preservation in the general plan, not a required element per the state, but my guess is that that's something that's going to be important moving forward, and we maintain the historic preservation element or component of the general plan. So does that answer your question, Commissioner, as to the purpose of the meeting this evening and the level of detail that we want to get into?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I was just more curious about the pacing of how we're going to move forward together in the year. If we're meeting once and then another time in a year from now, or in a few months, that kind of thing. So
that's exactly what we want to talk about tonight. Also,
okay.
is how does the commission and how does the council want to be engaged throughout this process? And that's a discussion Noe is going to lead you through. So
okay, thank you.
We don't. Dan, we might, when we open up the mural, if you want to go ahead and open up the mural, let's first show the process graphic part of it. Dan and Sasha and Lorelei are going to be taking notes tonight on an interactive mural. It's like a fancy whiteboard, stepped up, a whiteboard on steroids, if you will. And Commissioner Carranza and the other members of the council and commission, we have put together, just to help Well, actually, this was part of our proposal or our statement of qualifications to the city, is we've outlined generally how we would see the program progressing. But this is all open for modification this evening. But this graphic shows a process of doing a general plan program, how you first look at the vision for the community, and you have a series of community events, check-ins with the commission and the council, create some product, do some background research. We come up with options, what we call exploring the possibilities. And so we look at different options in terms of land use, circulation, open space, conservation, all of the topic areas. We go away, we work with the community and the decision makers on a preferred alternative, and then craft the general plan around that preferred alternative. We do the environmental documentation, the CEQA documentation around that preferable alternative, go through another series of meetings and say, does this reflect what has been heard over the last 18 months? And then go through the public hearing process. So that's a general plan program in a nutshell. There's all kinds of other things that can be changed and plugged into it as you go through. So we'll come back to this if you have questions about process as we go through the meeting this evening. Yes, Mayor.
Laura, just to note for commissioners and council, this is the very last page of the packet. And also for members of the public, in what we publish, this is in there. You can see the whole entire report, and this is the very last page. So anyone interested in seeing what's been put together, that is available.
And as this chart indicates, it's about a 24-month process. You don't want to go longer than that because people will start to lose steam sometimes. And it's tough to go faster than that because there's just a lot of community engagement to do. There are certain timelines that have to be adhered to from the environmental documentation process. So we think this is going to be about a 2-year process. So let's start with a fun question. And the first part of our meeting, about the first 30 minutes here, we're going to focus on challenges and opportunities. But before we get into challenges and opportunities, I want to brainstorm with the council and commission about the greatest assets of Atascadero. What are the things that make this community special and unique? Why did you decide to move here? Or if you grew up in Atascadero, what made you maybe go away and pulled you back because it was just too hard to stay away from Atascadero? So obviously, there are no right or wrong answers to this, and we're just going to ask each commissioner, council member and Mr. Hughes is starting by kindly raising his hand, and we'll start to take these things down. Yes.
So the main reason I actually bought my property here is the fact that the availability of property was present. The land use here is very open. We have we're in the middle where we kind of still have rural here. It's not necessarily like we're stack and pack. We're not going that direction like some of the neighboring cities are. So there's this ability to be able to enjoy our environment, enjoy the use of the land here. And overall, like it kind of ties into just our culture. We still have like that ag feel.
Great, thank you. Who'd like to go next? Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes, I've always characterized our community as one that is focused on families. And it doesn't necessarily mean traditional families, but all types of families. I believe that as I watched my family grow up in this community, families are first. And I think that's very, very important.
Great, thank you. Councilperson Newsom, Vice Mayor Newsom.
Sense of community and nurturing.
Very good. Everybody else is thinking, yes, Councilperson Funk and then Councilperson Dries.
Sure, it's the small town feel. We are small enough to be a connected community and large enough to be interesting and vibrant. So not sleepy.
Very good. Yes,
This one took one of my answers. I do like the small town feel. I've always enjoyed that with Atascadero, but I like the what I would consider semi-rural nature of Atascadero. It's got its little downtown city, but we feel like it doesn't take much to get out into the rural areas. But anyway, I think the small town is probably the biggest part of it that I like. But.
Very good. Other commissioners or Councilman Borbeau.
Yes, I mean, I would just also add, I love the small town atmosphere here, the sense of community. We have a great sense of volunteerism around here that I think comes from the small town sense of community. And I like the rural atmosphere, although I know that's not for everybody.
Very good. And Mayor, while we're waiting for the rest of the commissioners and for you to weigh in, I think if members of the public want to put anything in the Q&A function,
Yes.
we'll go ahead and have people type in some answers there, and Dan and Sasha will be able to capture that.
Excellent, thank you. So for those of you that are on the webinar, you'll see there's a little Q&A button down below, so you can click on that and then type in what you're thinking about, your input for assets, and we'll include that. Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And if something has already been said that you just agree with, don't feel like you need to chime in, but if there's something that you really want to add to it, please, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, and real quickly, Dan, I think we lost our screen share. If you want to put that back up. Other commissioners want to chime in. Commissioner Heath, we haven't heard from you.
Kind of like everybody else said, it's definitely a community that cares about the community itself. Everybody really seems to want to make Atascadero a great place. And I think everybody works really hard to do that. And they really support what the city has to offer. And they really like what the different organizations do for the city. And they like to volunteer.
About that volunteerism, you can't beat that. Let's see, Commissioner Van Dyckhoff, you've got your hand up, and then we'll come back to Commissioner Hughes. You've still got your hand up. Is that a new hand? Okay, good. Yes.
A couple of things that my wife and I have been here for over 20 years, and a couple of things that really attracted us to this area. One is just the astounding beauty, the trees, the nature around us. Most of our properties, we have mature trees, and we can enjoy wildlife in our yards, and that is very appealing for us. And also just being able to, at the time, being able to afford a piece of property, something bigger than if we had chosen to live in San Luis Obispo.
Very good. So even the skunks are okay, right? Equal opportunity town. Commissioner Hughes.
So this kind of ties a little bit with the mention of family earlier. We have things like the Tamale Festival and a lot of stuff that comes around yearly, our winter festivals. And those tend to be really good public polls. The city's known for that, but also it gets a lot of our just community out. And it's very interesting. We're a very eclectic bunch of people, all sorts of different walks, but every year we have these things that we like to go to. So like our public gatherings that are almost on like a calendar annual rotation, they tend to go over really well.
Very good. That's a great way to bring people together. And my colleague Noe was lamenting that we aren't geared up in time, or weren't geared up in time to go to the Tamale Festival this year. So that is definitely our plan for next year, is to make sure that we have an event at the Tamale Festival. Commissioner Carranza, please.
Yeah, I was trying to think of, not just noting the nature and the wildlife corridors that we have, but the connection to water and how important that is in a desert and really climate-stricken atmosphere we have all over the state of California. We have the lake, we have the Sunken Gardens feature that's like the lifeline, the downtown, the vibrancy, and then we have the Salinas River, and we have ecosystem heroes in our backyard. We have a huge beaver habitat that a lot of people don't know about, and we even have reeds on our Atascadero logo that are in the riparian zone. A lot of people don't think about the plants that are on our Atascadero city logo. That's noting the riverbed. So I think just the connection to water itself is a huge thing that improves my quality of life here.
Very good.
I'll add a couple of things. I would say our wastewater treatment plant, the fact that we recharge the basin, that is a really great asset that we have. I also moved here with my husband 18 years ago, and I like the eclectic nature of Atascadero, that houses the business community. I came from, very like grid and a lot of tract homes. And that was my life for many, decades. And so it was great to come here and see just the fauna and the foliage and the rolling hills, the winding roads, and just the uniqueness that I think is delightful.
Councilperson Funk, I think I accidentally put your hand down for you. So if you please, you've got your mute button on.
Thank you.
Sure.
What happened to that hand? I was going to note that we have a vibrant small business community. Our business sector is dominated by locally owned firms. And also to note, following Commissioner Caranda's comments about water, that we have a stable water basin. So our groundwater situation is not a problem. And that's very different from some of our neighboring communities.
Yeah, and I was actually very surprised to learn that when we took a tour in early December with your city staff and spent time talking about the water because I was very curious. I used to spend a lot of time in Cambria and know that they had a lot of issues there with regard to water supply. And did some work in San Luis Obispo and was surprised to learn that Atascadero doesn't have, as you've indicated, the issues that your neighbors do. So truly an asset. Mayor, is there anything you'd like to sum up before we move from the fun stuff of assets to the challenges that
challenges? I think what I'm really hearing from everyone is, there's a lot of agreement here. It's that small town feel, it's that community, it's all of us pitching in and caring about one another. There's I think a saying we came up with during strategic planning in Atascadero where everybody knows your name and is willing to lend a hand. That just kind of sums us up. So, yeah.
Very good. Hold on here, just checking some notes as we go through. Let's talk then about looking ahead. And you've mentioned, or you've had an opportunity earlier in the day to talk about some of the things that the community would look to address, but we want to look beyond, the local influences and think about the regional, the national, the global influences that we need to be aware of as we're looking toward the next 20 years. And the general plan can certainly look at different time horizons. You can look at the near term of 5 years, 10 years, which I would consider midterm, and then 20. So yes, it's a long range plan, but we can break it into those pieces to figure out what are there things that need to be addressed moving forward. On the diagram that Dan and Sasha have zoomed in on, certainly we've shown some things that are the here and the now, the COVID-19 and how that's influencing today. But we want to make sure that that's not something that's going to be an oppressive force as we're planning ahead. It's certainly something that's top of mind today. And the thought is, how might it affect land use planning or anything else moving forward? Something to think about. But we want this group and the public, if they want to put anything in the Q&A as a chat to us, what are the challenges that Atascadero faces that this general plan needs to address specifically? And I know this is a bit of a more difficult question, but is there anybody who'd like to go first and take it on? And if you see some of the things that are in the challenges there that you want to expand on, please do. Or if we've missed something, that's certainly not an inclusive list. We just wanted to get the thoughts flowing on the challenges ahead. And certainly city fiscal health and making sure that whatever land uses are comprising the city over the long term, that there's a balance to make sure that the land use will be able to pay for the services that the businesses and residents expect. Are there, there are climate change impacts that need to be accounted for, not just in the safety element, but in other components of the general plan as well. So who'd like to start us off on this question?
Charles.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you have jobs, housing, balance there listed, because that is, one of our most critical challenges and shortcomings here is that we have way more housing than we have jobs. And so we're exporting people every morning, primarily over the hill, as we call it, to San Luis Obispo. but related to that is a housing shopping imbalance and a housing eating imbalance, which is we don't have, and we've always had a shortage of retail in our community, and we've always had a shortage of restaurants in our community relative to our population. And those things are important to be able, as you said, to economically support the services that the people, the population in those houses need. I mean, and the challenge, of course, is we live in the age of Amazon, where probably every city in America has a surplus of retail zone property. And that's an extra challenge for us. But we're hopeful that addressing the jobs housing imbalance will help us attract more, stores and restaurants, et cetera. But I would say those things are the most critical to me from a general plan and zoning standpoint.
Very good. Thank you. And thanks for being brave to start us all off on this one. Yes, Vice Mayor Newsom.
I would say our challenges are that every property seems to be different. So when it comes to land use, when it comes to, we don't have tract housing. So not every neighborhood acts or feels the same. And so as we're developing some of the plans, we're unique throughout our community.
And thank you to members of the public. That a couple of people have put some thoughts in the Q&A, so we'll go ahead and start populating the mural board. You can't see the whole thing, but Dan and Sasha are busily, and Lorelei are busy getting things on the mural board. Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
So one of the things that we do struggle with is our circulation as far as certain time frames. So a lot of schools, like if you go off of Santa Rosa when school is either starting or getting out, not to get off on the highway because it will back up close to the highway, or even San Gabriel. Like if you're going out to Memorial Bay and you make a left on San Gabriel, the main school there's just certain areas that you just know not to go. And the people who are local were like, okay, we have a few small roads we can kind of use to get around it. So we do have these sluggish areas in our circulation where it's like, for 2 hours, stay away from here if you have a chance. So.
And that's great. Thank you, because those are the types of things that we'll explore in detail through this program, like talking to the community, and if there's a subcommittee of the council and or commission to help focus in on those as well. That's the type of detail that we'll be looking at. So great, thank you. And it might not just be a roadway issue, but it might be partnership with the schools. Are they all starting at the same time?
Exactly.
I experienced some of that when I was up in early December. I thought, what the heck is all of this traffic? And your staff was easily enlightened us. Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Yes, Councilperson Funk.
Yes, our geography creates certain challenges for us along with the opportunities. Notably, we have our ability to grow density more evenly around the community, or even to accommodate ADUs and that sort of thing, is constrained by reliance on septic systems by about half the properties in the community. It also, with our very long, our commercial center is long and narrow along El Camino Real and then crossways on US 41. So it makes it, and we have then a lot of living areas up in the hilly areas with larger properties where it's hard for us to create cohesive walkable neighborhoods. And we have to be selective about that. The history of the community is more that you go from place to place to place to place in your car and then you go home. And coming up with a vision that accommodates greater density and a better quality of life within greater density has to be done very carefully with regard to our geography.
And certainly the recent work on El Camino Real, there's some great stuff going on there to start to address some of the issues that you just raised, but the general plan program will explore how those types of things might be more distributed, those improvements might enhance other parts of the community as well. Great, thank you. Who'd like to go next? Yes, Councilperson, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Deriz.
That's one way. It's pronounced about 5 different ways, but I say Dariz, but Deriz, whatever. It's all good to me. Just put the 5 letters in the right order, and I don't care.
My dad used to say, you can call me anything you want, just don't call me late for dinner.
There you go. To follow up on Councilmember Funk with circulation, and I think even Randy Hughes had mentioned, there are certain areas where it's really not pedestrian friendly, I would consider. I mean, El Camino Real has sidewalks, that makes it pedestrian friendly, but we do have a stretch where there's probably more than a mile between sidewalks to be able to cross the street, and it is a pretty wide street at 100 feet across, so it's pretty daunting if you're not very ambulatory to be able to get across. But to be, as Ms. Funk said, to get typically to get from place to place to place, you're going to get in your car and you're going to go and do it that rather than park in a parking lot and take care of business just by moving around in a particular, maybe a more dense area. But the pedestrian friendly aspect of it, I think, is challenging. The downtown enhancement plan is going to certainly help that. I certainly believe downtown is going to make it much more inviting, and I think it's going to really help it a lot. I think enhancement is certainly the right word for it. So, thank you.
And if any of you would like to weigh in on opportunities as we're having this discussion too, please feel free to do that. I'd like to make sure that we balance the challenges with things that build on the assets, because those will help us also understand what we need to dig into as we're going through the general plan program. Who'd like to be next? Everybody's carefully thinking. I
will go ahead with a couple of things. Challenges. One is state legislation, particularly as it relates to housing. And we have traditionally done very well with housing in Atascadero. And when we look at legislation that has been passed and could potentially be passed in the future, that gives me pause for what do we actually want to do with our general plan and with our zoning that then may have unintended consequences because the state layers something in and now we have something that we don't want. So that is a challenge. I would also say we are a very we have a healthy fiscal situation. Our fiscal health in the city is good. We are challenged in that I think when we passed D20, we thought, okay, we can, number one, get some breathing room, hire, some people, particularly in police, but in some of those critical areas, and increase some salaries because we were typically at the very low end. But what happened is 5 cities total passed one of those measures. So now we're all kind of going up together. And I know San Luis Obispo is doing a salary study because they want to make sure they're paying their people enough. So the minute San Luis starts rising, I can see Paso rising, and then there's that likelihood that we find ourselves right back to where we were. And so we can't keep passing D20 measures. There's got to be another way, which again goes back to that jobs housing balance and how do we become more economically diversified and sustainable so that we can keep good quality people and take care of residents the way we need to.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and that is one of the biggest challenges I think cities face, and it's tough to compete too with your neighbors. You don't want to. They're your neighbors. Yes, Vice Mayor Newsom.
I was going to say one of the plus sides that we are not driven by tourism 100%. So when COVID hit, we weren't as financially impacted as other communities because we were so driven on that side. So I think it ended up being I don't want to say a nice balance, but it gave us some opportunities to not be as hit financially by the lack of TOT.
Very, very good. So just having a better balance and not a reliance. I remember one community that I worked in, I think car dealerships accounted for 50 or 60% of the retail sales in the community, and yeah. but if that industry tanks, the community would have been in trouble. So anyway, Councilperson Funk, you've got your microphone off. So yes, please, or
yes.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to be and promote ourselves as a healthy community with trails and trees and open spaces and a connection to the outdoor environment in ways that are small and large, that shapes the character of our city and can help us move forward.
So that's great. I think that's a really wonderful opportunity to mention, because you can partner attracting people for the outdoors with other things that the community might offer as well. Lots of good biking and hiking and just enjoying outdoors, and the zoo and the golf. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
I also like to kind of add on that. We also have the opportunity, because of that, to establish that this is a great community to establish your family roots in. It's great when thinking about having kids that I can take my kid to go through and have a walk, 5 minutes away from my house, where we get to see some of the most beautiful things. It's a huge perk that we have. And we already have areas set up. Like if we do strategic planning with these to either expand them or make them better, it can really add a lot to our community.
I'm hearing a huge love for Atascadero tonight. Other council members, commissioners. Yes, please.
When
Councilmember Bourbeau.
I may be getting ahead of myself, because you see, we're talking about opportunities as sort of advantages we have. I look at this general plan process, though, as an opportunity to, of course, set our future, but in particular to hopefully redefine for the future what we expect in our downtown. So, I mean, to me, that's an opportunity within this general plan review, is to really look at changing the nature of our downtown over the long haul.
Great. That's a huge comment that you've just made, because it tells us that there will likely need to be a focus in the general plan of envisioning downtown and really talking to the community of what they'd like to see downtown and what downtown Atascadero can be that's different than your neighbors, for sure. That builds on the uniqueness of the community. And it's not just beer versus wine. It's something deeper than that, probably.
I assume they showed you around downtown. I mean, we have single-story small residences in the heart of our downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, not what a downtown is for.
Let's see, it looks like Commissioner Schmidt, you've got a comment to make, and then Commissioner Carranza.
You referring to me?
You turned your microphone off, on. I'm assuming you wanted to say
No, it's
something.
been on for the whole time.
Oh, it has, okay.
I've been listening to all the comments. I'm a person who has been involved with general plans throughout our county and the surrounding 3 counties for 40 to 50 years. And what disturbs me a lot is a lot of the things that's being discussed are things that have been discussed for the last 40 years. And yet we haven't been able to accomplish any of these things over that period of time. I look at a lot of the challenges that we have as opportunities. I guess one that's not is traffic. Commissioner Hughes had referenced about peak hour trips at certain times around schools. I live next to Santa Rosa School. I live on Santa Rosa Road. People use that as a shortcut from Highway 101 to Highway 41. They don't really care about there being houses and families in this area. They do their 40, 50 miles an hour. Even the police department does the same. And so I think we have a community that was designed between 1913 and 1916. And all of our streets were designed when cars went putt, 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 putt. And now we go zoom, 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 zoom. And there just isn't a consideration by people who travel through town of the impacts that they create. One of the greatest impacts is, for instance, like on El Camino Real, where people drive 50 miles an hour. What they don't understand is that El Camino Real is a conduit, and every intersection is spaced the way it is, so people can make left turns and right turns onto that conduit. But when you're doing 50 miles an hour, there's less time for people to make those movements. So for me, whatever we could do to try to get people to understand that their habits and how they behave contribute to some of the problems that we have in our community. We talked a little bit about downtown just now. I think one of the challenges of downtown is to try to remove peak hour commute trips from the downtown through the downtown area, try to route them around the downtown in some way so it makes it more friendly in that area. And then with some of the comments about imbalances, maybe Atascadero is intended to have an imbalance in housing and jobs versus trying to battle that conundrum. Just accept the idea that we do have more bedrooms here. People travel over the hill or to the north and so on for their jobs. There's people here who drive down to Los Angeles every week for a job, and they live down there for 3 days, and then they come back here for the 4th and 5th day and go back. So when I look at a lot of the challenges, I keep on hearing the same themes over and over again. I look at also the challenges as wonderful opportunities for us to improve. I'm for one, I think, for instance, Sunken Gardens is kind of a wasted area. It's a prime spot, but look how we use it. If we want that for the way it's used, that's fine. But if we want to improve the downtown, there used to be a gas station in front of Sunken Gardens in the 50s. So I'm kind of a person who, when I brainstorm, I brainstorm ideas. I never discount those ideas. I always write them down. I don't throw them out because they might be stupid, because it might trigger something else in my mind. So hopefully as we go through this, all of us will be open to ideas presented by all aspects of our community in terms of improving it for the future. And then also, as we look at the general plan, how do we want it to operate? How do we want to use it? Is it something that's going to be cast in stone? Or is it something that's going to be flexible for us to make changes? Because better ideas do come up. One of the really critical things that people overlook is funding of projects. I was on the Council of Governments in our community for a long time, and funding cycles are every 5 years. Sometimes it takes an idea 25 years to get funding for it, and by passing of 25 years, maybe that idea is no longer good. So I'm hoping that as we go through this, that all of us will have really open minds in looking into the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. You covered a lot there, and I think some of what the general plan can certainly do is, as you've indicated, there are no bad ideas as we move through this process, and certainly the general plan can start to prioritize those things that the city looks to accomplish within 5 years, within a shorter time frame. And so that's something that we would look to the commission and council for that direction. We're getting a couple more comments in from the public with regard to challenges, opportunities, and assets of Atascadero. So thank you for those of you who are listening in this evening for putting those in. We encourage you to continue to participate in that way. Are there any other commissioners who would like to speak up? We'll go to Commissioner Hughes and then Councilperson Funk, and then see if we might want to move on to the next component of the program this evening. And then also Commissioner Carranza. So let's go Funk, Hughes, Carranza, please.
Okay. one issue we haven't talked about is that we risk being hollowed out demographically if we're not able to address our jobs housing imbalance, if we're not able to address enough housing for the younger generation coming up, where seniors will be able to move in from elsewhere with money that they've earned other places. But we will have young families are having a hard time finding housing and jobs here in the community to sustain themselves. And we could lose the people that make the family friendliness such a character of our community.
So keep the balance, ensure that there's a balance. Yes, let's see, Commissioner Hughes and then Carranza.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed is we can struggle with some of the concessions that can be asked. So one thing that is kind of good right now is there is a push for more affordable housing. And the unfortunate thing that does come with that, though, is if builders are qualifying for low income on it, they can ask for a certain number of concessions. And it's very common for them to always do it with parking, because that tends to be the area that's most complicated. And when they bring that, the state gives them that green light to be able to say, you can ask for something and almost demand it. It's hard as a commissioner when we had a situation where there's a person who's disabled. They were like, yeah, I was turning with my vehicle and I got hit here. And we're trying to find a way, okay, you're going to add this much parking, but this many more people are going to be on, right? So it's an imbalance. So then we're like, okay, what's the overload going to be on the street? And what's hard about that is once you get like 4 or 5 of these projects rolling, they could be different builders, right? That are all qualifying for these same things. So like my concern long-term is the bigger picture of like, once you've done that enough, how does that affect the traffic? And it's hard because as an advocate for, people who live in this community, when you have something that allows kind of a green light like that. The only thing we've been able to do is try to implement parking plans with the individual rental companies long term, but that doesn't necessarily eliminate the issue. And so that's kind of something that I've noticed that like it's almost always an immediate ask on it.
And that's a tough one, Commissioner Hughes, for the very reason that you mentioned, that there are state laws that allow, essentially tie the city's hands in its ability to say yes or no for things like that. Yes, Commissioner Carranza, please.
Yeah, sure. There was at the meeting before this, the economic development meeting, a talk of tourism and how we don't just want any tourism. We want tourism that attracts, first and foremost, serves our locals and our community here. And then we'll take the rest of them and invite them to become part of the party, right? Something that struck me at that meeting, there was some rhetoric around that. And I think for me, what that looks like is not wanting to have so much tourism that we build, all these, oh, great, we can get this here and we go to H&M and we can go to this and this and that. And then we lose our small businesses and we lose that quality of, your head spinning because you get off the freeway and you're like, am I in Atascadero? I don't know. I could be anywhere. There's so many different, I don't want to name names, right? But just the fact that you go anywhere off the freeway and you see all these great businesses downtown, but they don't inherently look like a small town community. It looks like you could be anywhere and it's thriving, but maybe not in the way that promotes that character that we all love about Atascadero. So, trying to get sales tax revenue and trying to, become a little bit too glamorized. We don't want to get to that point where we're too gussied up, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and I think what I heard you say too is not just the glamour, but we don't want to be Anytown USA.
Exactly.
Continue to carry that distinctness of Atascadero.
Yes, you got it. Yeah. The other thing is, I know we have in our general plan a native tree ordinance, and that's good and well and designed for a purpose, but we don't seem to have figured out, and I think the staff has been working on this for over a couple years now, how are we going to get funds and select the right urban trees and do urban forestry, not just in our downtown, but all along El Camino. We have really, really hot parts of the year and not just the summertime. So for walkability purposes and in general, urban forestry, that's a big challenge I see coming forward into the next 20 years. And then what'd you say?
That's important with regard to climate change issues, as well as how can you use trees to both cool and sequester carbon. Anyway, that's getting too complicated.
Yes. No, I'm glad you answered that. The founder of our colony here, he had a lot of plans laid out around orchard, as well as an art district that we seem to still name, but we don't really have an art district, I don't think. So that to me is an opportunity, is celebrating some of the past history and placemaking around art district. So that's my comments.
Mayor Moreno, I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you want to wrap up this part of the discussion so that we can turn it over to Noe to talk about reaching out to the community as part of this project.
You know what? I think I don't think any wrapping up is necessary. I think you've done a good job of capturing everything, and I just want to remind all of us we're about 15 to 20 minutes behind in our time schedule. So, which means we're just going to have to crunch things at the end. So, the more succinct we can be, I know we'd all like to go into long stories, myself included. Let's keep our answers as succinct as possible so we get through everything and we don't shortchange ourselves at the end.
Very good. Noe, I'm going to turn the next two parts of the discussion this evening over to you, and I'm going to go off camera and mute for just a little bit here.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for your conversation. It's just so refreshing to hear everybody's commitment, energy around their town. And so I really appreciate it. I have the sort of fun part of the work here, where I get to go out and engage with the community and, and I was pretty bummed that we didn't get to go to the Tamale Festival. I was hoping that, we'd be able to do this around that time. So I know it was just a couple weeks back, but haven't been a big tamale fan myself. I want to just show you here, if you could zoom in a little bit, Dan, on the engagement sort of platforms that types of activities that we typically would do, but also this is just a start. We want to be able to really talk about this in a way that is like, it's just, hey, we can do a variety of things, anything from, getting the word out, raising awareness through newsletters, social media, and obviously now, the website and all the digital kind of components, but then also getting into some meetings. The standard of engagement typically are forums and, now virtual meetings like this one, interactive focus groups and other kinds of discussions like that. The digital platforms can go a whole range of directions in terms of surveys, but both intercept surveys, you talk to people directly, you can talk to people online, and even those have a wide variety of those, including some that are map based and some that are text based and some that are graphics based and photo based, etc. We do have some. We talked about, for instance, I think Commissioner Carranza, you mentioned the role that the commission and the council should have in this process of engaging the community. We try to really leverage the knowledge that is collectively within all of you about the community, and to help us really link to different types of platforms, different types of places that we can get the word out and get the word in. That's critical. We're not really just trying to build awareness, but trying to get people to understand what the process is about, and also have some input about, well, how their town will grow. So as you can see, there's the continuing on here on the discussion types, community workshops, engagement toolkits, pop-up events where you go, like I said, to the Tamale Festival and others that I know you have. We also, because this is such a long-term type of planning process, we want to talk to the young people and see what they want to do, see how they are really thinking about their town, and what are some of the ideas that they might have, and obviously they're not going to come to this kind of meeting, and I think we all recognize that. So how do we engage them in a way that's fun, unique, and also still productive in terms of their input that can literally go into the policy building and policy development. Some other things out here that may be a little bit more far off, like the planning van, where you go and, you know, set up shop, be a little bit more mobile, walking tours, planning tours that we like to call walk shops, or scavenger hunts. Now even could do geocaching and other things like that. Just having open houses and studios where people come in at their own leisure to discuss things. So these are just some examples, but what I think the real question for you, we have two questions really, is one, what should be our driving principles for one thing, but then also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan. Did you have your? Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to quickly add, if there's any questions on these different tools, Noe and I would be happy to answer those questions. But also thinking about COVID and the requirements around COVID, there's a lot of flexibility. You know, some of this is high tech and some of this obviously is in person. And it's good to have that balance. One thing I did want to mention just for the bigger process of sort of scoping, different engagement events, allow the opportunity to engage people in different ways. But it's also one of the more involved as far as time from staff and even commissioners and council members, but also the consultant team as well. So there's also a cost component as well. And the most important thing is really being purposeful and strategic in how we're engaging the community. So I just want to mention that as one, if there's any questions, but let's jump into, if there's not questions, we can jump into our questions.
Right. No, absolutely. There's different ways of going about this. I think in the ideal world, we would say everything's good, but clearly, we have to consider budget and strategy as we proceed. But the questions for you are really, the guiding principles. What should be the overarching principles in terms of our engagement? But then secondly, I like to think about how the implementation. I like to think about four types of categories of engagement processes. One, people, right? So who are the groups, the organizations, the sort of maybe sometimes informal, not always really formal organizations, but who's the sort of social influencer of the town. Secondly, platforms. A lot of these are social media driven, but not always. Where some people are using, obviously Instagram or Facebook, or others are now doing TikTok and things of that nature. So how do we reach? What types of platforms might we be able to reach? Next are, I call parties, but these are really festivals. Again, the Tamale Festival, events, other places that we can go and have a presence and capture people where they already will be. And then lastly, planning groups. So again, the commission and the city council. So really, this is just a way of teeing you up to have you provide us with your ideas about how we should proceed. And Mayor Moreno, you had mentioned, in our conversations, you had mentioned a few things. Maybe if you don't mind sharing some of your sort of overarching guidance that you provided to us earlier in terms of the community engagement. I think that would be very helpful.
Well, I think Vice Mayor Newsom is already bringing the youth voice to us, so we're
excellent.
It's how do we, the big question is how do we reach the most and the broadest, amount of people across all spectrums of our community as economically as possible. And so when I think of things like surveys, if you have an online survey, how do you do an online survey in a way that elicits the type of information that we want from the people that we want it from, and it doesn't become one of those where you have, maybe someone driving saying, hey, email or, survey in on this issue in particular, because everyone's got one issue they want to talk about. Well, no one else really knows that it's going on. And then suddenly you have something skewed, and maybe even from people that don't live in the community. So it's making sure that if we do some sort of an online survey, how do you really make sure that we reach as many people as we can in our community, and make that as broad as possible. And that would be the case with anything that we do. I think the more we can be in person with people, the better. Again, COVID makes that challenging, but some of those events, like you said, Tamale Festival, we did, I think it was at Colony Days. We did for our, I think it was the downtown infrastructure, maybe it was the corridor, one or the other, but that got a lot of people. So if we have events where a lot of people are already going to be there who clearly are part of our community, I think those are some great things to take advantage of. I guarantee you we're not going to have a plan van. That's not in the budget. Yeah, so those were just some of my thoughts, is how do we really make sure it's broad, we get as many people as possible, and do it economically.
Absolutely. I think your notion of really being broad-based and including a variety of people, and I think when we talked, our response was really the way that you do that, to not get at the sort of regular folks that participate that that we hear from frequently, is to diversify our approach, diversify the platforms. And so, really getting at, again, where people will already be, where you're not requiring or asking people to come to a special event only. That's the only opportunity they get to participate, but a variety of places that they are able to really reach into this process. So I don't know, I want to hear from others. We really want to hear your ideas. Again, people, platforms, parties, and planning groups. What are your thoughts? Councilmember Bourbeau, I think you have.
Yeah. Well, first, I would agree with the mayor. I X'd out a few of these things. No plan van. I don't see walking rolling tours as being efficient, or scavenger hunts, and youth art activities kind of escapes me. But no matter whether you have an in-person opportunity input or you have an online survey, it's always going to be skewed by the people who show up. People who have the interest and the energy to come out and do that. So I think you want to do a little bit of several of these things, to the extent that it fits within the cost of doing it. Online surveys are better nowadays than mailing out surveys, and they're cheaper. A workshop, the idea that it was mentioned about having poster boards up at events like Colony Days, I think that was, Phil would know better, but it seems to me that really brought people who would not normally participate to see, hey, what's this about? Oh, that's interesting. They found the displays interesting, prompted questions and input. So you can have some of these other things if the cost of doing it allows. But you're always going to have some extent of participation is always going to be skewed to those who either are already interested or have just happened upon it. And the more we reach out, the more input we get. It's not a poll. In other words, it's not a matter of we got 100 people asked about this, so we better do this, and only 2 people asked about that, so we'll ignore it. To me, it's all about getting ideas and feedback from as many people as possible, within reasonable cost of staff time and consultant time.
Well, we will make sure to note that there is no plan van. We've already heard that a couple of times now, but to your question, I think about the art and youth. Just a quick clarification. What that is really, it could be as simple as an Instagram contest, right? Where we put out a question and say, what do you love about Atascadero? What is the future of Atascadero look like? And then, there might be some incentives or things like that, but it could be a very creative, low cost kind of way of getting that art, right? Or having that youth voice. So anyway, Commissioner Carranza, please.
Yeah, I actually did want to hit on the youth art and youth voice specifically. Just to give a little bit of why I feel this is so important. I worked on a multi-million-dollar stormwater management grant that basically wanted to get ideas from the youth around low impact development and ways to improve stormwater on their campus. And it was working with even down to kindergarten level. I'm not joking. They were doing design charrettes of what their outdoor classrooms and buildings could look like. So I think partnering with the school district is going to be an asset to us. They already, one of their goals for their graduating seniors is to be civically engaged global citizens. So how could we easily, partner with them for real world opportunities to
get involved with using their teachers to have little design charrettes. And it doesn't have to just be seniors.
Right.
So I think beyond just PTA meetings,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'd really like to see that.
Absolutely. Just thinking through some of the, how can this fit into the civics courses or social studies or history or whatever that is, right? Even nowadays, I think that there's a lot of STEM work that is happening. And so could those even presentations or engagement directly through the classes would be a really important way to go. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
I think
2045. I think how old are they?
Yeah, they're going to be in their prime time.
And they're going to be at that level where they might still be, oh, well, no one really asked me. I am capable, but they might continue to be apathetic, which is, I think, a lot of the population thinks they are. So anyhow,
it's a way to build. Thank you. And if you have any direct connections, I think that would really be appreciated, particularly with the schools. That's always helpful, an introduction or things of that nature that would help us make that
Where
connection.
do you want those information?
Could I suggest that we give them to, go ahead, Mayor Moreno, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, we'll take care of that.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. If
Perfect.
people have ideas of specific groups or connections, clearly we're well connected with the school district, but let's get those details later and kind of focus on the bigger picture.
Perfect. Councilmember Funk, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. So as we are trying to reach out to get inclusive voices in our community, we need to make a special effort to reach out to those who find it harder to participate in the kind of meetings that we're doing. To me, that means that we ought to look for some events at playgrounds and at youth soccer events in order to reach out, particularly to our Latino community and other things where we might reach out to them. We're less engaged with them. And that's a growing segment of our community. Also, we need to think about how families with young children can participate. And again, playground or events where families are. And also look at our study sessions for Measure D20 as a model for how to run the online engagement portion, because those sessions were really productive and got a good cross sections of people, allowed members of the community to interact with each other constructively. And I think used staff time pretty well. They were at different times of the day, different days of the week over a series of a few weeks, and gave us some very constructive input.
Great, thank you for that. Commissioner Newsom, I'm sorry, Councilmember Newsom.
It's okay. I
or
have
Vice Mayor Newsom.
It doesn't matter. I have a
All
lot
the
of
titles.
titles. Yeah, exactly. So as I look at this, the question that came to mind is as we look to shape 2045, it's really hard for us to imagine. But I sit here and look at the youngest one, my 3-year-old, and realize that as we're making decisions for them, what do we need to be looking at? And so when I try to address that, I look at the age demographics. Who are we trying to reach? Obviously, the younger generation is hugely computer savvy. How do we engage them? Every day we drive down Traffic Way, try to engage my daughter in understanding what they're doing with the big construction equipment. I think a way, if you want to get our community involved and we're shaping the future for these kids, is put stuff at the community center. Teach them what we're trying to do for the future. Have informational, hey, we're digging. What are we putting in? What does that do? The kids that walk through that construction zone every day have no idea what the future impact, let alone how much that costs. Teach them fun, exciting fundamentals that relate to their age. We talk about age demographics is on the upside of the aging community that has no desire to use a computer, doesn't have a cell phone. They can't access those social media sites. We need to be reaching to them. A lot of them are old school newspaper. We need to be doing inserts as to this is what we're doing, how to participate. We do have a magazine that gets to every home. Whether or not that gets read is kind of I'm not sure what the feedback on that is, but again, print material for an older generation for something that they can understand, larger font, making sure that we're hitting it from, 90-year-olds to 3-year-olds. This is our future now, but it is also their future of 20, 30 years from now. So making sure that we're involving everybody is kind of my take on this process.
Sure. And I think your point about the young people and the impacts that they have, I mean, a huge part of the discussion above this or right before this was about the connectivity and the pedestrian friendliness, which of course we know young people are the ones that are the most pedestrian, right? They're the ones that walk the most and ride bikes the most. So we need to be thinking about how this impacts. But Dan, Lorelei, you had some input here or questions?
Well, one quick actually follow up on what Councilmember Newsom just mentioned, which was great because I was thinking about this as well. The notifications and getting the word out is really, really key as part of the overall engagement. I just wanted to say one clarification. The plan van concept is not to buy a vehicle. It's actually just vinyl wrap, like on a city fleet vehicle to sort of brand the project that gets driven around. So I just want to clarify that, but we've had some fun with it where we put vinyl wrap on a project around a city bus, for instance, but it's like a billboard that goes around the town. So just a clarification on that one. But to Councilmember Newsom's point, a lot of different methods for getting the word out is really key, and that helps support the events, the surveys, everything else.
Yeah, and the plan van does help in terms of going out, building awareness, and also, being at those places where, again, we're talking about being places where people already will be, for instance. So Lorelei, please jump in here.
Oh yeah, just to add on to the digital piece of this, I'm really engaging people, even 40 and younger, I guess, we've thought about some ideas internally with staff, and having a QR code that we could kind of make it fun and let it go viral would be really fun. You have some sandwich boards around town. I mean, when restaurants closed and took away menus, everybody went digital, and you can now use your QR code on your phone to respond to a survey. So just to have even our local restaurants have that in-house, have a sandwich board, have something posted at the elementary, middle schools, high schools. Of course, they can't use their phones during class, but if they wanted to bring them out for an exercise, you could have the entire class take 5 minutes and respond to a really great survey. We could do assemblies. We can host people when things clear up in the rotunda for some, workshops with youth. So there are so many ideas that we're brimming with to bring it, but it could be really fun, and you could make general plan outreach hip with the younger kids if you really found a way to just infiltrate their world of, TikTok or Instagram or, or just even on our Facebook for some of the others to kind of have them chime in. So
absolutely,
wanted to throw that out there.
And, I think that one of the key things that we need to do is not make it like about the plan, right? Make it about the future, make it about daily activities, about daily life and the impacts that it has. And because once we get into the sort of administrative planning things and people, I don't know about that, but you're right. Let's make it fun and make it appealing to that younger demographic.
You might get the fire department to go ahead and do a rap video to that as well.
Oh, they do a good job on that.
Oh, they do. You have to see it.
Okay, that'd be awesome to see. Commissioner King, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was actually kind of talking about this and along with what Heather Newsom said, I think that at least in my high school experience, we didn't have a lot of education on local politics. And so it might be really interesting to have our city council members actually go to social studies or government classes or whatever and engage with the high schoolers and just kind of tell them, what they do and what's coming up. And that way they actually understand that the city is run by real people and, they take the input of people who live here. And I think it's a good option or a good opportunity to not only get them engaged in this process, but to get them engaged in the community in a general kind of sense. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, like a guest lecture series almost, right? Where you get, folks that really know the town and know the politics, know what's going on, the future, and can really bring it to bear.
Exactly. Because not only are these people future residents of Atascadero, but they're future voters. And, so many people don't think it's important. What effect does it have on my town? Well, if we actually send Mr. Borbeau or Miss Funk or, even the mayor. I mean, if the mayor is going to come speak, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. The mayor's coming. And I think that would be a really cool thing because you sort of think of them in these ephemeral ideas of city council member, mayor, and you don't necessarily realize that they're, they live here, they work here, and they're people just like you, and they need you to be engaged and their support and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Commissioner Schmidt, go ahead, please. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I haven't heard a discussion within the area that we're talking about, reaching out to people with English as a second language. Is there going to be some type of reach out to what would be probably a large group of people who are underrepresented within our community because English is not their first language?
No, thank you for that. I speak Spanish, and that's one of my. I'm also happen to be the director of MIG's Equity Studio, or co-director of the MIG Studio Equity Studio. So I think that's an important factor, at least personally and professionally, that I want to bring to bear. And I think we've heard that not only about the community here, that it is a growing segment, but also we've heard of the fabulous taquerias and how it's, you have quite a bit of an overrepresentation of Mexican restaurants in Atascadero. So,
and good ones.
Yeah, and I've heard in good ones. So I'm excited to get into that. And I think you're right. There is, I would say there is a bit of a barrier because the language issue, the cultural issue, but also I think the approach sometimes is tough. Folks don't always participate. As we've tried to do Zoom meetings and they're not there. You got to go to them. You got to go and sort of engage them at the soccer games. I think, as somebody had said earlier, you have to be in maybe with CBOs that work with them, or with trusted sources, trusted champions of the community that might fit in there. But frankly, I do think that just having somebody like me that speaks Spanish is a huge help to that process.
Okay, thank you.
No, I would just kind of pick up from what several of my colleagues have said. The van, while we said probably not a van, it did strike me that possibly advertising on our dial ride buses, that if that's the purpose of the van, is just kind of awareness, then possibly something with the dial ride bus. Someone mentioned soccer games. What I like the idea, though, of is the community center. As Vice Mayor Newsom said, not only do you have the center itself, but you have all the activities. So you have the youth playing Little League and their parents are there. And then you've got pickleball folks, and you've got petanque, and you have tennis. So you could probably go, certain times of the day or days of the week and reach a broad spectrum of people who are using our community center. And of course, our community center folks could let you know when that is. During colony days, it's obviously the last couple of years with COVID hasn't happened, but typically they bring the third graders through City Hall. And I've actually been the one to talk to them up in the council chambers. And that could be a good way to engage those third graders. And to Commissioner Keene's point, Peter Smith is one of the poli-sci professors over at the high school, and he's asked me to come, and I've gone and spoken to them. So I love the idea of us doing that kind of thing more.
That's excellent. I think that would be a really, exciting way to engage young people. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, we should also not discount the opportunities to be where organizations are already gathering, with our very vibrant civic community here, with Kiwanis, with Rotary, with AEUW, Quota Club. And don't forget the opportunities for engagement after church services. We do have a very active religious community as well.
Sure, absolutely. We like to piggyback on, we call those community briefings, right? Can we just borrow 20 minutes of your agenda time and, present a brief segment of the workshop that we're already planning anyway, things of that nature, and try to just, again, be where they already will be, to build that awareness and maybe lead them into other things that, like a survey or another way of providing input. Let's see, any other thoughts just on general engagement? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Carranza.
I think Commissioner Heath has his hand up first and then.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, the color of the hand. And sorry about that. Commissioner Heath, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, like with the local Kiwanis group, they have a very strong presence on Zoom for their weekly meetings. So it'd be really easy to share information.
Great.
Because not only are the members on Zoom, but they have a big screen up in the room. So if you're presenting something remotely, everybody in the room can also see what you're doing.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. That's exactly the type of insight that we were hoping for in this discussion. I guess Commissioner Hughes, go ahead, please, and then I'll come back to Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, so we actually have like a lot of thriving lodges, things like that around here. And I've talked to a couple of people who like run them. And one thing that they're currently having issue with is trying to get, access to a younger demographic, getting new people to come in. Because a lot of them, they'll do barbecues. COVID, of course, put, a stop on a lot of stuff. But as they're reaching out and they're trying to find effective ways to get more younger people involved, it might be good for us to be able to network with them and see what they're doing, like what's working with them. Because we as a city, we're hosting an event. It's really neat seeing like all these different groups of people that tend to come out. We might be able to get some good free information or free feedback from what's working.
So do a little bit of reconnaissance on the types of activities that are working with folks. Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for that. Councilmember Funk, go ahead, please.
One last suggestion. At least once in this process, go to dinner time at Echo, our homeless shelter, and talk with people who are working to rebuild their lives and have a future in this community.
That's a good source.
Yeah, and again, that's part of the getting at folks that aren't traditionally represented and that still have a voice, that we do want to understand what their perspective is. So I'll move us on to the role of this group, these two groups. How would the council and the commission like to be involved in this process, in the general plan update? What do you envision for yourself? Is it, and this is, I think, getting at the question that Commissioner Carranzo had laid out for us early on, is how is this going to happen? Is this a check-in? Do you want to be out there? Some folks have already mentioned, going out to be guest lecturers, to just engage with the community, engage with young people, with the high schools. How do you want to be involved? What do you envision as your role here? How can we leverage your knowledge and network in the town? Yes, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I think that it would be key to be an educational piece of it. I think that if we have a unified statement or educational piece or things to be able to answer questions and consistent with what we're doing, I think a lot of times the information gets misconstrued, and trying to get people engaged is one thing, but to educate why it's so important. A lot of times after this is all in place, we have people step up and say from the public, I wasn't a part of it. Had I known, I would have done this. And so if each one of us, which there's a lot of us on here tonight, was able to educate our circle, like we always try to do on our day-to-day lives, we get busy. But if we have information to distribute, then we become that pipeline. I can connect you to probably 45 preschoolers and underage kids and moms. That's a different demographic than that has time to go to some of these meetings at night because they're with their families. So if each one of us did that, then we have a chance of reaching, 3,000-4,000 people, and maybe one person can, step up and do something had they not originally known about that. So having a tool for us to repeat and get out there a unified conversation, education piece. I can tell you that our kids in the history classes in the high school are being taught who's in office. I got a picture to text saying, hey, by the way, your picture's up. They're teaching these young kids how to become future leaders. They need to fill my role. I'm no longer under 40. So somebody needs to come in at some point and replace me. What do they want to take over at that time? We are spending their money. And, how does that play for them? That concept of, oh my God, in 10 years from now or whatever, they could fill into our shoes. None of them think about that at this age. Maybe we become that one person that influences a generation of leaders.
Yeah,
Right.
a uniform and consistent message is a necessity.
Right. Yeah. Consistent messaging, consistent approach, basically. Yeah. As you were saying, your thoughts, Vice Mayor Newsom, I just had the sort of image of a workshop of 45, preschoolers. I thought that would have been pretty fun.
8:30 in the morning, I could take you. You'll
you
tell
can
me how
make-
fun it is when you're done.
You can make it happen. I'm
Yes.
a dad. I know what you
Every
mean.
day.
I'll take the high school seniors, you take the preschoolers.
I know. And they all love the mayor. Please send the mayor. They don't like the mayor pro tem. They love the mayor.
Right on. Other thoughts on how you envision your role? What?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. Go
I
ahead,
think you're asking,
Councilman Burbo. Yeah, go ahead.
if you're asking how, we can help, I mean, I think each of us is involved in one or more groups around town. I mean, I can arrange for this to be a presentation subject at the Rotary Club, or if we just want to, hand out a survey to those folks who are, a lot of them are kind of active already, but there are many of them who wouldn't, sit down and partake in this unless it's put in front of them. I'm part of other volunteer groups, things. I mean, I could go hand out a survey or something at the pickleball club. And we're all the kind of people who are involved in probably more than one thing.
Sure.
That, or like Susan mentioned, a church group or something. If you're part of a church, it'd be easy to, ask for 5 minutes to explain that this process is going on and your input is desired, et cetera. So we're all part of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more groups in one way or another. And we could each at least pick one of those groups and personally go ask for input.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that would be very helpful. I think, again, the local champion, the folks that really know these other groups are going to be important. Commissioner Carranza, go ahead, please.
Give us something to go viral with. So a hashtag or a graphics. And I'm on Instagram at least, once a week, maybe more, maybe. So, I think that would be good for us to have a consistent, just flooding it out to different networks and tagging people. So right away we could get started.
A bit of a campaign. I know that a lot of times what we've seen to be really successful, especially in towns like Atascadero, where there's a rich history and a very unique history with a colony and all that, that people want to see images, right? Even of it emerging. You saw some of those that Dan put up through the presentation. Those by themselves can be very strong motivators. You're harking back to the future, harking back to the past, but still thinking about the future. Hey, at some point, this town was planned to be what it is today. And now we're at that same stage where we're looking forward for the future. So I think that has always that historical appeal. The black and white, really grainy images are really helpful to really elicit a response. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I was going to say we have locally a great Facebook group called I Grew Up in Atascadero. And I look at it as an excellent litmus test for the diversity within our community. And there's every perspective that you can imagine that are on it. And so there are people who are the moderators of that group, and it would be we could ask to see if as part of this program that we could post this on that group. And there's probably, I don't know, 5,000 people who are members. And guarantee you'll get some type of comments back by majority of them.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I belong to my own hometown. Mayor Moreno, go ahead, please.
I am curious on that front because there are a lot of folks who are part of that group who no longer live here.
Right.
So, and there are people who come to our restaurants who don't live here. So how in this feedback that we're seeking from all of these places, it's one thing when we're at a little league game or with the pickleballers or something like that, but how do we make sure that we're really getting feedback from our community and not people who lived here 15 years ago or people who are visiting from San Luis Obispo or LA.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, typically, for instance, with a survey, we would ask that question. We would say, are you a business member? Are you a business owner? Do you work in Atascadero? Do you live in Atascadero? Those kinds of questions. I think when it comes to what Commissioner Schmidt was talking about with a Facebook group, I mean, we're not going to do a poll necessarily, but we will do some awareness building, and then say that links to a survey. And then that survey again has these kind of like, tell us where you stand. I grew up in Tesco, but moved away, or so that we can then tease the data a little bit to understand, who's still here. Not to discount folks that visit, but they or that have moved away, but yeah, they're no longer here. I think my instinct is to really hear more from people that are here and that work here and that are also visiting here. I think that that's an important feature for understanding why Atascadero is such a really powerful draw. But I would want to hear from you. What do you think? what would be the protocol there? And Dan, go ahead. I think you've thought about this before.
I was going to add actually a little bit different component to the discussion as well. We're about to jump in a 2-year process, and as we go through this process, there's different phases. Existing conditions analysis will be a lot of data and reconnaissance, visioning, going through alternatives, getting into the draft plan and policy as well. And so as part of thinking about the engagement piece and also roles, I did want to pose a question of how active council and commissioners would like to be in this process. And what I mean by that is we can do check-ins, during each of the phases and get feedback, or it could be a more proactive process where we have, every couple months are going to council and commission in workshops or study sessions. It's a big time commitment, but we really want to make sure both the council and commission are heavily involved through this process. So we talked a little bit about notifications, getting the word out, which is fantastic. We also showed workshop toolkits, but sometimes we have the opportunity for council members and commissioners to go out and sort of run little workshops or meetings or presentations as part of this process. So we know all of you have busy lives, but one of the questions we want to kind of pose there is sort of how active or how involved both the commission and council like to be in the process, and we can tailor and adjust accordingly. Obviously, ultimately, the draft general plan goes to council for review and final approval. But we're going to tackle a lot of different public policy topics as we go through this process. So that's probably a broad way of saying how to be involved, but another way of thinking about it as well.
But yeah, just more specifically as a body, right, Dan? I mean, as a group, how do you envision yourself being involved? Not obviously individually helping us connect, but as a body.
I would say, and I think it's hard for us to know exactly what that looks like, but I would hazard a guess, at least for the council, that we would probably err on the side of being more engaged than less engaged. So I don't think any of us are looking to have like a 2-person committee that goes off and does it, and then the other 3 are just like, yeah, just come back to us in 2 years. We're not looking for that. We want to be involved with this. But when we look also at what's on our, what's on the calendar coming up with staff, can we be having a report every 2 months? No, that's probably too much. I think I can trust that if you're talking with staff and going through this process and you're getting a feel for us and what we want, you'll probably have a sense of when to come and do those reports to us. I mean, at a minimum, I think what I saw on the timeline at the tail end was like a twice a year type of thing. And it could be there's twice a year, but then there's also those in-between things that we're a part of. So Noe, could you give us a better idea of, kind of in what I said, like what that might look like?
Sure. So there could be, typically we would have, maybe an advisory committee, which I think in this case, this sort of feels like an advisory committee that is composed of folks that likely would, the commission or the elected officials would sort of appoint. And so that could meet any time from every 2 months or every quarter, for instance, and we would have something similar to what we're doing today, where we would have a meeting, we would structure it, and then go through the engagement, go through some initial findings, the process that you're seeing here. So, you know, it could be as much as that, like twice a month, even once a month. I don't think that that's what you want to do.
I don't think that's what we want. And
Yeah.
I don't, so personally, you know, I'm open to what my colleagues think. The advisory committee, again, you're taking 2 of us and the other 3 are kind of like, yeah, see you later. No, like we want to be part of it. So I don't think we're looking for an advisory committee. So we can kind of take that off the board. We are the advisory committee.
Right. That's what I meant to say, is not a whole separate body, but rather this group, the folks that are here, be the advisory committee, act as the advisory committee for the general plan. And so it's just a matter of how many times I think would be reasonable for you. I think we're open to however often you want to meet. I think for us, it's fun. You know, honestly, this is great.
Councilmember Borbo.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking out loud, so I'm not hung up on any of this, but I would expect that Phil would keep both the city council and the planning commission up to date on how this process is proceeding, so that every 2 or 3 months we get just a verbal, I'm not talking a deep staff report, but just a verbal about what the groups, what the consultant and what his staff has been up to. And that might shape when we want to get involved in terms of making decisions or providing guidance. Because it seems that tonight we're talking a lot about process.
You're breaking up there a little bit.
But at some point we need to weigh in with our ideas.
Right.
And so I don't know, I just see that Phil and his staff as being a conduit perhaps to keeping us informed, and then we can judge when that might lead to us needing a more in-depth session.
Right. And that's also another structure, is an ad hoc type of process, right? Where when staff is seeing that, hey, this is the right time, we're getting to that point where this group as an advisory committee as a whole can really chime in. But I see the city manager. Go ahead, Rochelle. You're on mute, I believe.
That'll be another $1, Rochelle.
That's a buck.
Go ahead.
No, you show as unmuted, but you're not. There's something, your connection isn't working, I don't think.
Uh-oh.
Did somebody
The city.
It's that broadband of ours.
No, I don't think so. I think it's probably her headset or something like that, or setting. Dan, go ahead, jump in here while we figure that one out.
We're just going to mention, and the city manager can also type it in Q&A, and we can see that as well, but we'll figure out, I know we have IT folks, so we'll figure out your audio. One thing I just want to mention, just here in this discussion of these check-ins, but at focus times or focus phases with council and commission, one thing that could work really well, does in the past, is where you have the check-ins during each phase, essentially. So there's a product, there's something to react to, but having it as a study session or large amount of time on the agenda so you can focus on it. One, it gets your feedback as a legislative body, but also can be sort of a mini community workshop as well, because there's going to be a public comment portion. So that could be a way to sort of manage it, but making sure you're heavily involved as each of the major phases sort of move along during the project.
Thanks, Dan. I think the city manager's, ready. I saw the yellow block light up. Go ahead and unmute yourself again, please.
I'm sorry, I was trying to figure something out. Not sure why it's not working.
It's working now. Go ahead. Oh.
No, I'm getting an echo.
We can hear you.
We can hear you fine.
We can hear you.
Okay. One of the things that I suggest is that we do major check-ins with the council. I'm sorry. Hey, I'm going to just stop here. I'll figure out something else.
We can hear you, Rochelle.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm getting a major echo. So either I can't talk to you or I hear myself on repeat.
Okay. Well, we can come back to you if, yeah. So Councilmember Funk, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to suggest much of what like Dan described here, where we at major check-in points, we have this kind of workshop where we are able to be much more interactive with members of the public who comment and with ourselves, you know, and which is it contributes to a richer dialogue, and then rely on the sort of the process updates or what are the issues that we're starting to consider be part of what Phil brings to us on a regular basis, every month or two or is needed, just so that we're ready when the next big chunk comes up and can invite people and run that engagement properly.
Absolutely.
Also, I don't know for the planning commissioners, but most of us on the council, this is a part-time activity and we have day jobs. Most of us own businesses that we have during the day. And so, I'm eager to be out there and engaging with other groups, but my time to do that is limited.
Okay. Yep,
also because of other responsibilities I have with council on daytime meetings.
Understood. Thank you. Commissioner Schmidt.
Yeah, obviously time is valuable for all of us. I'm wondering, are we looking at gathering together to, for instance, through this first phase, or reaching out to people to discuss how successful it is or what we could do to improve it, or what are the reach out points going to be for? And I personally, in terms of time, email, kind of a gang email to all of us at one time where we can go through the bullet points and see what discussion items need to be discussed, talked about, or, just something update. This is how we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking about, each of us have friends who we trust, and maybe the idea of extending ourselves beyond the 12 of us to 24 of us by going to someone and asking them, we're going through this general plan process. Would you be interested in helping us get out to other people? And then again, we turn 12 to 24, and we each have at least one, probably more, that we could talk to and ask to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, multiplication, absolutely. Vice Mayor Newsom, go ahead, please.
Some of the things to keep in mind is with the communications, it's hard with the Brown Act to be all of us involved in it. Rochelle will talk to you about that. So the update in council and making sure not all of us are CC'd. The second thing is it is an election year. So there will be a change up and possible change up in council, let alone planning commission. So as we get closer to December, what you're interacting with us may change. So for some of us that are in an election year, we may not be here to the end of it. So knowing that as we're getting, some of us may want to be more involved, but we want to be able to choose that as we go along. If you asked me today if I wanted to put in a few more hours this week, I would probably be no, but in a couple more months, I might be more willing to give. So having the opportunity to sign up or participate in different levels as this progresses, I think will be ideal for some of us.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
We've got our city manager back.
Oh, there you are. Go ahead, city manager.
Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you. I also want to make sure that we understand resources. It's not inexpensive to have everybody here talking between staff and MIG and consultants and all of that stuff. What you see here is what we've built into the kind of the scope, the budget, which is, hey, before we go out to public and get one of those vast public engagement things on a topic, we check in with council. We say, hey, this is what we're going to go out and talk to the public about. Get some of your feedback, massage it, make sure that we're going out to get the right thing. Then we come back after we've talked to the public and gone through the planning commission and get in that circle, come back to the council and give you feedback on what you heard, what they heard, what we received from that public engagement, so that you have it and then get in some input on the next public engagement process. So you go back to council again, get engagement from that next public engagement process, go out to the public, and so on and so forth. Now, the council would have opportunity, if they would like, certainly keeping with the Brown Act, to be part of that big public engagement circle, but that would leave it up to the council as to how much they want to be involved, and or the planning commissioner in those individuals. But they'd be touched as part of each one of those, both before and after. And sometimes we would try and combine those meetings if possible. Hey, this is what we heard. We're going into the next public engagement push based on this, and get your input at that time. This feels like it's a, something we can do within the city council meetings, within the existing planning commissions. And then, like I said, would allow all of you some of that opportunity in between to, if you want to hear more from the public, if you want to hear it at Kiwanis, if you want to hear it somewhere at Colony Days, to also be a part of that.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Madam City Manager. Go ahead, please.
Sounds, based upon what I've been hearing from my colleagues, what our city manager says, it sounds like this is, kind of a touch point schedule that, that we could support and feels good to us. I'm going to look at least to my council members, nods, thumbs up on that. How does that feel to you? Okay. All right, good. Anything else you need from us on that point?
No. In fact, I think I was about to wrap it up and pass it back to you for a second, if you wanted to wrap us up and have any final thoughts on this point. But that was really it.
I think this has gone really well. It sounds to me like the input we gave you for the types of engagement we're looking for, and I will ask you, is that fitting within the budget that we have set?
Well, I think so. I'm going to ask Dan to jump in here and really help us clarify things a little bit, because, well, go ahead, Dan. As the PM, I don't want to, speak for you.
The short answer is yes, because there's some flexibility within the engagement budget to where we can move things around, focus on some of the ideas that came up here during our discussion today. And I'm pulling back up these points. A lot of this is already included in the scope we put together. It's really how we execute that. And so this feedback is really, really helpful on that. I think we need to wrap back around and just make sure, there's certain things in here fit within the existing budget. One thing I did want to mention actually at the beginning of this process as well is where we are within this process is we're going to refine sort of our scope budget schedule, send that back to council for review, probably sometime next month. But some of these items, they could also be included as optional tasks, depending how we go through this process. Maybe we need them, maybe we don't, so there's some flexibility to it. But we'll make sure that's fleshed out a little bit more detail here as we get through the scope refinement. But nothing in here strikes me as something, major, massive, totally different. This is really, I think, a refinement of some of the ideas we've been working with staff to develop already. So.
Okay. I think we have some excellent ideas. I want to thank all of my colleagues, just the discussion that we had of how to outreach all the different ideas. And I know more detail of that will come, but I think we've done a really, really good job of pulling that together. And I'm excited. I am so excited about the prospect of really getting so much robust engagement from our community from all spectrums. This is going to be fantastic. So with that, are we at the point where we have gone through the roles and responsibilities and
Yep.
we're on to the next 45 minutes, so we could take maybe a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. I think that was exactly the right, the place where I think we can be at.
All right, perfect. So 8:05, how about we come back at 8:10, and then we've got another 50 minutes to go. Sound good all? All right, see you in 5. All right, we are back from a recess and can reconvene our general plan scoping study session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Laura Stetson again. Thank you, Noe, for leading everybody through that last portion of the program this evening. A lot of great input, so thanks. We've got just under an hour to cover some still pretty critical questions for you. And so just to remind everybody, we do want to wrap up by 9, as the mayor indicated. The 3 hours would speed by, but thanks for the bio break, Mayor. I think everybody appreciates having a little bit of time to stretch our legs. We have 4 unrelated questions to discuss this next module of the program this evening. And rather than combine them, I want to break them up a little bit and kind of indicate how much time we might be able to spend with each of them. The first one and the last one are probably the meatiest. The first one with regard to the level of economic and or fiscal analysis that we want to incorporate into this general plan program. And I'm going to have Ashley Knott from EPS lead us in this part of the discussion. Then we're going to ask you whether or not you would like to use the general plan as an economic, use the general plan EIR as an economic development tool to help streamline future projects. And the reason we're asking this question is because it does have cost implications on the general plan program. Then the third question is whether or not Atascadero wants to have an actual printed version of this document or have an interactive online general plan. And Dan's going to share with us an example of something that MIG has done. Dan, per Burlingame, is that the one we're going to review this evening? He's nodding yes. And then lastly, the catch-all question: what have we missed? What else would you like to weigh in on with regard to the issues to address as part of this general plan program? Not issues, but what are the things that we need to ensure that we take into account as we're going through this 2-year community conversation? So with that, Ashley, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you. I'll help facilitate, as will Mayor Moreno, as we go through this. If we could spend maybe about 20 minutes on this particular topic, that's what we'd like to do. So Ashley, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. My name is Ashley Cannett. I'm a principal with Economic and Planning Systems, and we're the economist on the team. Very happy to be joining MIG and really looking forward to this discussion tonight and the discussion we'll have for the next 2 years on these topics. The question in front of you is, what level of economic and or fiscal analysis would be helpful to inform the community and council policy discussions? And generally, general plans typically include some level of economic, market, fiscal impact analysis, but the effort really varies depending on each jurisdiction's needs and priorities. And tonight, I've already heard a lot of your input already. I've been listening and taking some notes, and we know that these considerations are really important to the community. But in asking this question, we're really trying to gauge just how front and center economic development and fiscal sustainability should be, and important to my scoping effort, at what points in the study you'll want this information. These ideas, if you gave us no direction on this, these ideas are likely to float through the general plan to some degree anyway. But I'm interested in hearing if you think circumstances and opportunities in Atascadero warrant a deeper dive, and if so, the information that will help you to guide us. And Dan, did you have another slide that you were going to pop up to help with this piece? Okay. Well, for example, and this is now what's going to be reflected on your screen, some cities really appreciate receiving a summary of fiscal trends in the city very early on and doing some thinking about the fiscal impacts of land use decisions so that this data really stays, top of mind as we develop the alternatives. So as part of some of our existing conditions work, we can do some of this research and report it back to you. Other cities, so that's level A here. And I'm going through these levels, but they're illustrative. They are not exhaustive, and they are not mutually exclusive. So it's just an example of some of the feedback that I'd appreciate hearing tonight. So level A is, let's get some of this information in front of you early so that it's a part of your thinking, so that you understand fiscal impacts of land use decisions as we start the process. Other cities, level B here, really use fiscal impact analyses as a lens through which the alternatives are being evaluated. So imagine we get to the point where we have 3 land use alternatives and you're interested in comparing them and trying to figure out which of the alternatives to move ahead with as a preferred alternative. That would happen once the alternatives are identified and prior to selection of the preferred plan. And while completely optional, this would be level C, many cities include an economic development element. And an economic development element would overtly recognize that land use, circulation, and policy decisions that you make affect the local economy and bring it all together. But even without, as I said before, even without an economic development element per se, fiscal sustainability can really be a lens through which you evaluate, think about your general plan opportunities and evaluate the general plan alternatives. And I think I might just pause there. I guess a specific question for all of you is, would a fiscal impact analysis comparing the relative fiscal performance of 3 alternatives help guide you towards a preferred alternative? Is that something you'd like to see in the scope? Or would you like some of this information earlier?
Ashley, if I could maybe ask for some clarification, I know it would help me. I'm gonna assume that level C, while lovely, is not in our budget. So, but that aside, like level A and B, could you let us know the difference? You heard us talking this afternoon, and one of the things we want to look at is sunken gardens and the existing uses around there, potential upzoning, that type of thing. So can you tell us the difference between levels A and B? How would that actually look as we look at, say, the sunken gardens area? And if I'm zooming in too narrow, let me know, but that's, I'm trying to get a sense for all of us in the differences between these two in something like that.
Yeah, that's a good example. And what I've put here in front of us is really, it's using a fiscal analysis as a lens to talk through level of detail and timing of that information. And to kind of back up a little bit in thinking through fiscal issues, we're talking about tax revenues and the cost of providing public services and impacts on the general fund, sustainability of those sorts of decisions. And while we don't always think about it, land use decisions have an impact on fiscal sustainability of cities. So as I'm talking about fiscal impact, that's really what I'm talking about. What I'm hearing from you in your question is maybe some appetite to dig into market fundamentals or market feasibility, or as you think through various development prototypes, what are the development feasibility considerations of some of those choices? So there's a distinction there. I hope that clarifies and doesn't further confuse, but a little bit of a distinction between fiscal analysis versus market and market feasibility analysis. And we can do both, or all, or one, or the other.
Again, Ashley, we have a budget.
And I'll throw it back to Dan, on the budget question. But I think from my perspective, I can hear you articulate the questions that you're interested, and then I think we can frame a scope that meets the budget. So I will let Dan answer, but I wouldn't even necessarily say that you don't have the budget for level C if that's what you wanted. I think we would just scale the effort to meet the objectives. But
that's what I was going to add as well, is consolidating into an economic development element is not a complicated thing, and that's definitely part of the budget as a standalone document. It's the analysis that goes into it that's really kind of key. And one thing Ashley hinted on is when you do a general plan process, because it is a higher level kind of in a study or an effort, we'll do land use alternatives that look at sort of broad economic development or types of businesses, types of jobs, types of housing. Ashley mentioned, maybe we prototype them. What that means is if there's a particular type of housing or mixed use product that doesn't currently exist in Atascadero, we can do some economic analysis on whether that's feasible. So in addition to just being a land use idea, we can actually test it. And that is more analysis, that is more time and effort, but it can help inform the decision-making process. So those kinds of things on the economic side or even the fiscal side, it's important just kind of hear the discussion, and then we can think of what would be needed from a technical standpoint to kind of answer council or commission's questions.
Okay, and if I might, I know Councilmember Funk, I know you have your hand up first. I saw Phil pop in. Director Dunsmore, did you have something to clarify within that, or before we get going? Okay.
I have a real quick question for Dan, and maybe this is a way to clarify this. And could it be said that level A and level C are optional, while level B will happen no matter what if we have to analyze the alternatives?
I can answer that. I don't know, Dan, if you do not need to, there are any number of criteria you might bring to an evaluation of the 3 alternatives. You don't necessarily need a fiscal impact analysis to help you make that decision. It's very common, and it can help shape a discussion around fiscal sustainability and the relative trade-offs of the land use decisions that you're making. But none of it is required. I do think, cities need either, in my opinion, a level A or a level B, if not both, so that you are guided by some of that information and some of those trends and some of those fiscal effects. So I would offer that.
I will add, we did do a big chunk of level A when we did our El Camino plan a couple of years ago. So we have some of that data. Of course, now it might be a bit outdated, but still.
Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that we need some basic grounding in the sort of level A, but level B only at like the 30,000 foot level, not at a real detailed analysis. What we have to come out of this plan with is an overall plan that is sustainable for our community. We are at risk of being unsustainable financially because we are have such a long history as a bedroom community. And if we are unable to craft land use plans and development strategies that somewhat rectify that jobs housing balance, and nothing else changes in the way cities are funded, we could easily craft a plan that gets the city in real trouble for that 20-year time frame. So that's the level of which we need guidance. And then we need to know if there are really big issues that are different between the plans, but not if they're, this is 5% or 10% this way or that way. But this one will get you into real trouble, and this one won't. That's the level we need to hear.
That makes good sense to me. Councilmember Dare is your next for me.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, Phil kind of responded to my comment before I made my comment. My initial reaction is level A is really where I feel like we need to go. This is really kind of beyond my professional expertise, but level B seems a little bit even maybe too much in the weeds or too detailed, more than what we need. But again, I'm not a financial expert in this area, but understanding the vulnerability of where we need to go, I think is what we need to look at. Probably more importantly, if parts of B is necessary, then I'm okay with that. As it's already been discussed, level C might be a little bit more than what we need. But level A is, from what I understand in the description, is what I think is what we need more than anything.
So early identification of vulnerabilities is really what I
and I think that could shape where we're going to go, in the future. Because this is a 25-year plan, so trying to figure out, you're not going to plan it all the way out, but understanding where we're at now, I think could help us, shape the future step by step.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Schmidt, please.
Yes. When I hear the word alternatives, I think of EIRs and not economic analysis. So how do the economic alternatives mesh with the environmental alternatives?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you'd like me to take that one, I'm happy to do that. Commissioner Schmidt, for those of you familiar with the requirements of alternatives for environmental document. An environmental document requires that alternatives look at those which are capable of reducing impacts associated with a project. So serendipitously, it might align with some of the economic analysis, but not, that will not be the focus. Largely, the fiscal impact analysis will stand on its own. The environmental, the CEQA analysis will fulfill the requirements of environmental law, and that's it, to look at impacts that reduce environmental impacts and not deal with the economic aspects of it.
So there could be some serendipitous meshing, but they're basically separate.
Yes,
analysis.
Correct.
Okay.
And Commissioner Carranza.
Yeah, it's kind of like Doree's. There's many ways people say my last name. So I was curious, not to shy away from level C because it looks like, oh, it's a higher letter. Maybe that means it's more money. So let's not even talk about it. But what goes into the words policies and actions, the element in bleeding out into every part of the general plan? What that kind of looks like for me is, oh, this is going to help build a roadmap of actions and solutions, possibly that people that aren't on this council and aren't on this commission can look back at and say, are we on track with some of these strategies? So am I off on that? Or, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what that looks like when we read the general plan. And then I'm also, if I don't want to put Lorelei on the spot per se, but I'm curious to know her thoughts as someone who's been with us for only 8 months, but this is like her bread and butter.
Yeah, I think Lorelei, would you like to jump in first with the city perspective or the staff perspective?
Sure. Of course, I appreciate all direction, and I'm kind of a sponge in my sponge mode right now. But even the action plan that we went through earlier today that outlines short-term goals from 2021 to 2023 is something that could be used and easily turned into this level C economic development element. I think we have a lot of pieces from projects and conversations we've had that could be utilized. It's really the where do we want to be to make sure we're looking at the lighthouse as we, bring our ship to the shore 20 years from now. What do we want to do today to make sure that we're heading in the right place and we stay a balanced community and we keep that, that resident and local focus, and how do we translate that into economic development? I think those are the things I would love to see in here. But again, when it comes to fiscal analysis versus economic development, they're different things. So selfishly, I'd love a roadmap. It would just make the job so easy and clear about what my next steps are. But at the same time, I think, I think we have a lot of pieces. We could include economic development under our existing elements. We don't have to necessarily create a new one. We could have a box under our land use policies that are specifically economic development related tasks or policies. There's some things that are in public works realm of transportation and circulation that definitely have to do with unlocking the economic development potential of some of our interchanges that could go. So there's so many ways we could kind of, tackle this, but I think, really this comes back to decision makers. What do you want that direction to be? I'm your steward. I will drive the boat and get you there, but you tell me what you need and we'll make it happen.
If I could, with what Lorelei just said, I've been thinking all along that we have economic development throughout our general plan, but what the council has said time and again is we have to rectify our fiscal situation long term. We have to be sustainable. And if economic development is just kind of a little piece of or a box here or there, are we really not placing the importance needed? And is something like having that separate element, would that be key to really say, hey, this is key? Because I realize that's economic development is the only thing with fiscal sustainability, but it's a huge part of it. It's really sort of the driver of it. And so might that be necessary if we're saying this is a top priority for us? Is it necessary to then have a level C, or are we just kind of playing around?
I don't know if that's a question for your colleagues, but I think we have a lot of flexibility with where this goes. It could be, economic development will be woven through, if you decided not to proceed with an element specifically focused on this, it will be woven throughout. We've heard, concerns about the effects of COVID and whether or not any of that is structural, or your jobs housing balance, downtown enhancement, fiscal sustainability, some of the benefits you experienced when COVID hit because you weren't overly oriented towards tourism. Those are some of the things that I've heard and that we can incorporate throughout. But we can be pretty flexible if you did want to go forward with an element that really brought it all together and integrated all of these components. I think that's really the benefit. It's the integration. It could be something like an economic development and fiscal sustainability element, or it can be something where we're really focusing on those things together. But if you decide not to go forward with that, those items really will be reflected in the general plan throughout.
Madam Mayor, we have three hands up, and I want to be mindful of time and three more topics we need to cover. We'll go Commissioner Schmidt, Vice Mayor Newsom, and then Councilmember Borbeau.
The plan is a 20-25-year plan. Is the economic analysis somewhat of a baseline? And as the future comes, are there updates that are needed to see you're still on track through that period of time?
That's a good question. I think you can integrate programs and actions and metrics to make that decision, to have the element be reflecting that, and it can be up to us as we go. But I think it's true, with any sort of economic analysis or fiscal analysis, we are really in a moment of time, and this is a 20-year plan. And so we need to be thoughtful about keeping our eyes on the programs and actions that get us through these next decades.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom?
My recommendation would be levels both A and B. I think at this point, not C, but A and B.
Thank you. Councilmember Borbeau?
Yep. You've been mentioning about having a separate economic development element. I don't, believe we necessarily need a separate element in the plan. So I'd like to keep, I'm predisposed to wanting as few elements of the plan as possible. But as far as this, I think Councilmember Funk alluded to it, and that is, I'm looking for an analysis that says, hey, if you want to increase housing or increase housing density, that's a big money loser, for example. What would that generate versus what would it cost? That's the kind of thing we need to know if we were to say, as we go down the road, because we might want to have, 3-story apartment buildings downtown. Because I'm interested in doing that, but I'd like to know what the fiscal impact of that is, if that's something that can be done through economic analysis.
That sounds to me very consistent with what I heard Councilmember Funk say. So some basic grounding in level A as we start to prepare and think about what the alternatives, the general plan alternatives will be, and then a level B, a high level B, so that we have a basis for making a decision going forward that is focused on sustainability.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, what I think I'm also hearing is perhaps economic development should not be a standalone element, but that's a critical piece to incorporate largely into the land use element, but possibly into circulation and infrastructure to deal, for example, with broadband connectivity and other things as an economic development tool.
I think you summed it up very well, Laura.
All right, great. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you. Thank you.
Dan, if we could go back to the mural board, that would be great. We have three other key things that we want to ask you this evening. I'm going to jump ahead to the third bullet just because I think it's kind of fun. And just to break this up a little bit about the desired end product. These are all questions that we're asking you because they have fiscal impacts on the general plan program. Whether or not you want to have an interactive web-based general plan. And this affects how we start from the get-go on structuring the general plan. And Dan, maybe you can bring up Burlingame as an example. And do you know off the top of your head what the cost was of putting this piece together? And I didn't ask you this earlier, so sorry for the on-the-fly question.
It varies, but the good news is it's included in the draft scope.
It is, okay.
One of the things, just to kind of tee this up, is the traditional general plan is a hard copy document. I think we heard the comment earlier of, can this be more of a living document? And we hear that in a lot of the communities we work in as well. So a couple of things I want to show, and this gets to Laura's point on how we set this up. There's kind of two big ways we can approach the final document. One, and there's an example from Cupertino. This is a hard copy. It's a PDF. It's beautiful. And it is sort of a traditional general plan structure. It's not very interactive, though. It is just a nice, put together, beautiful document, organized well. The thing we've been doing more recently is putting together what we call an e-plan. And this is very different than a PDF. So if a PDF is on a website, it's searchable. You can type in words and things come up. The difference here is this is a queryable general plan document. What I mean by that is basically the whole general plan is almost an Excel file. You can think of it kind of that way. But when we put it into this website, you can search by a specific topic or a specific area. And we've done this hard copy as well, but there will be different icons associated with every policy. Well, this is how that policy is actually implemented. And what's really powerful about this sort of interactive web-based plan, or what gets us excited about it as nerdy planners, is you can actually, and by you, I mean council members, commissioners, members of the public,
people wanting
staff,
to invest in.
You can actually query, okay, let's look at downtown and city manager and timeframes. And you can pull up, well, actually in the particular one I'm in, it doesn't have them because that was just one thing. Let's do a different example. It will actually search implementation programs based on your query. So if you're looking for an area or a particular department, everything is linked, and we can work with staff to have them be able to show whether it's been started, in progress, or completed, and when it's updated. So it becomes a very interactive tool. And this is an example from Burlingame, but they're starting to use the general plan actually as part of their strategic planning for different departments as well, which is really, I think, what we've kind of heard a little bit tonight, is having this ability to have flexibility, interactive, but also proactive as well. So you can actually become a living plan. One additional thing I wanted to show, and this actually builds on the discussion we just had, this particular plan you can organize by key topic. So everything's coded, but if you're interested in sustainability, it'll pull up every implementation program that's been tagged for sustainability. We could do the same thing for economic development or fiscal, for instance. So you don't necessarily need a separate element. It's just organized that way as part of the plan. So we're starting to do this more often, just because it's found to be a very useful tool for cities that we're working in. But it is, if this is something that sounds good to commission and council, we can kind of organize the whole process to feed into this type of interactive plan at the end.
And Dan, just to repeat that in the draft budget and scope that we've provided to city staff, an interactive plan is included.
An interactive plan or a highly visual hard copy, but not necessarily both, because they do require about the same amount of work to produce.
Okay.
And so what I'd like to do is we've got 20 minutes left and there's still other things. So let's just kind of quickly go through, but also members of the public, if you put into the Q&A, what do you like? What's your input here in terms of hard copy or an interactive? So Councilman, I'm seeing thumbs up from Commissioner Schmidt liking the interactive, I think.
Yep.
Councilmember Darris.
Thank you. I like the interactive, but I like it as a council member or a commissioner. I'm wondering and I'm asking this of the consultants, what is your experience with the general public actually using this online interactive option? I mean, how much value do we get from it?
It is a really good question. So what we started doing on the last couple ones, and Hayward was about 4 years ago, and Burlingame a recent one, and this is customizable again. Actually organizing a component of it by who the user is. So if you're a resident, you can click here. Well, why do I care about a general plan if I'm a resident? Does it make it easier for me to walk? The mobility element, you can link to these different things. So it becomes a little bit more interactive or understandable. I think one of the key things that has been valuable in this sort of a tool is without getting too technical, the state requires that you only update or amend a general plan 4 times a year. You can have many things in that amendment, but there's a process you go through to update and keep it active or keep it relevant, which is different than our process. But if you need to do technical updates or implementation programs get approved, one of the things that is valuable that we've heard for developers, property owners, and residents is seeing things get implemented in real time. So this becomes a real-time, up-to-date interactive portal. You can do that with a hard copy, but then you're printing multiple versions or whatnot. So it becomes easier to maintain and keep it current in a digital format.
And how do we inform the general public that this is even available? I mean, I would assume, before I became involved in any sort of city government, I would never even thought to have looked for something like this online or to go to the city's website. So, I imagine there would have to be some additional outreach to even express that this is even available for the general public to look at and use as a tool as for the city that they're living in.
Yeah. Correct. And that was part of the process Burlingame went through, is to get the word out through publications, newsletters, their normal processes. Also, when a resident comes in with a plan or an application, for instance, they would get asked to go to this website, and they can do some queries and searches as well. So like most things the city does, it will require notification and advertising for sure.
Okay.
Phil, you came on screen. Did you have a comment to make?
B? Sorry.
Yes,
Phil.
yes, Phil.
If I was going to make a comment, I would say I really love this absolutely digital format. The old format, you can hardly see it. This old format here of book is in the dark ages. We never open these books as planners, as staff. The print documents sit on the shelf. So if there's something like this we can use, if it's more accessible to the public, if the city council and planning commission like it, I just want to give some praise to that. That's all.
Right. Like I said, as a council member, I love it. As a commissioner, I'd love it. And if I was on staff, I'd love it, because it's certainly easy to navigate and go through and look and find, and all the answers are there. I just want to make sure that the general public knows that it exists, and it's a tool that they can use as well. And if that's the case, then I'm all for it. I think it's a great tool to have for everybody.
They're more likely to find this and learn about this than they are to come get a big book from City Hall or download hundreds of pages of PDF.
How many people know about a big book?
All right, we got 15 minutes. I think we're leaning towards interactive, but we got a few hands here. So Commissioner Carranza, Vice Mayor Newsom, and then Councilmember Funk.
Okay, real short. Ms. Moreno here. I know we have so little time. All for interactive, just yep, 200%. What if the campaign that we're already doing we're gonna wrap the ride van, right? Or anything like that. Are we going to potentially kind of double up in a way of marketing this as our deliverable, possibly as a living tool? So I'm just thinking, instead of doing our marketing for engagement and then, okay, another big push that's a completely different thing. Like, what if the public knew this is what we were getting at? That we're not just asking them for opinions and go, great, thanks. And then they never really get to know where did the Bible go? Where's that thing? So
I'm thinking, Commissioner, that the QR code will live to serve that purpose moving forward. Boy, do I love QR codes now.
And one thing that works really well in this process is, and we have this within our proposed scope already, it's branding as part of the project. So in this city, it was Envision Burlingame, all these colors, everything else. For several years, we had a website up and running that was envisionburlingame.org. When we finished the project, it became the e-plan. So we're building that branding as part of the process. But trying to get that clear messaging, is always important.
I'm all for the interactive.
And Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, my main criteria for it is does it support the usages we see most? And what I see most is people who are looking to purchase property in the area or expand a business or do something, and they want to know what zoning options are available to them, what are the implications, what's the neighborhood, what are the decision criteria that will be used to evaluate the project. And on the flip side, the general public wants to know what are the priorities that protect me as I'm looking at advocating for or opposing develop things that properties near me property owners might be wanting to do with their properties. So if the interactive plan is such that you can find that stuff, and get to it in some reasonably logical way, I'm all in. If it's difficult to answer those kinds of questions, to sort of read through the document and figure out what you might do, then I would be more concerned.
And Councilmember Funk, those are really interesting questions that or comments, and we could build that type of querying capabilities into it if that's of interest. There could also be a link, to example, to the zoning map, which wouldn't be part of the interactive plan, but if we would want to build into the plan a link to the zoning map if somebody had a question about that, because that's different. But I'm hearing you say people want to find out more about a project and is it consistent with the general plan. Those are the intricacies that you could build into it that we would want to talk to folks about how exactly do you want to use it. It's possible. It's a little bit more work.
Is that little bit more work still within the scope that you've set out?
Likely not, Dan, I'm thinking.
Likely not, but we can add in some options as well, or think through what that process would be. The designers and coders of something like this are in-house MIG staff. So it is hyper customizable. One thing this does require, which is not part of general plan scope, but would be part of additional, is there's also a maintenance back end side of this. That's not complicated on our end as consultants, but staff would need to update and maintain it, and we do training sessions and those kinds of things. So it's a little bit more involved than like a hard copy plan, but staff would also be updating regularly the hard copy plan. So there's some balance there as well.
And this is a 25-year plan. How likely is this kind of platform that is working on today's technological platforms? How well is it going to be something that we can utilize 15 or 20 years from now?
Excellent question. I think if we think of the website 15 or 20 years ago, it's very different than it is today. So it's a hard one to answer because technology changes so fast. But the structure of this could evolve into, next versions of internet probably pretty easily as well. It's already digitized, I guess is my point.
Okay, because hard copy is always a technology that one can use, regardless of software changes.
No paper.
So I think we're seeing, Laura, do you want me to wrap up?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're seeing a consensus for the online interactive. Certainly if in our communication with people, we somehow find out that, wow, our community really doesn't want that. We've gone in the wrong direction, then of course we would want that feedback. I personally love paper. I don't know what it is about. I just know it's all there and I can find what I want, but that is very old school. And I don't think that will be best serving of our community. So I do think the online interactive is the way to go.
And Madam Mayor, we don't need to make that call immediately. We can work it into the scope for now. We're not going to start writing the plan until, a year into the program where we've done community engagement, and we can always pivot as need be. Or if somebody has a fantastic new way to create things that we haven't thought about that pops up in the next year.
Never know.
You never know. We've got about 10 more minutes left. And what I'd like to do is to ask a question that's a little bit of a complicated question. And then the last thing we had posed, is there anything else we should discuss? We could do that as a rapid fire maybe, or even something in the Q&A function with the commissioners and councils if we can. But I did want to ask a key question about using the environmental document as an economic development tool for the general plan program. And as I indicated earlier, the reason for asking this question is because it does have cost implications. Bear with me for 2 minutes while I set the stage. The environmental impact report examines at a very programmatic 30,000 foot level the land use policies, the circulation policies that are all of the policies that are in the general plan broadly. What are going to be the impacts over a 20-year period of moving this policy forward? It's largely associated with the land use policy because everything else follows from the land use policy. The option that we have is to know that there are catalytic sites in Atascadero that this general plan may identify. And do you want to look at those catalytic sites in more detail so that when actual development applications come in, the Planning Commission and then the council can say, those have already been addressed as part of our general plan program, and we don't need to go through a lengthy CEQA process to have those projects approved. And I can't, at this point in time, guess how many of those sites there might be, but for sake of argument, let's say that there are 10 catalytic sites that you want this EIR to examine in more detail to expedite those projects when they come in. Be they residential, commercial, mixed use, I'm not sure what they would be, but Phil, you came on screen. I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on that.
I'll make a quick distinction about two different topics on this. Now, are we asking if we want to consider updates to our general plan map and they're considered future development projects when we change zoning on a property, or is that automatic? Or are you solely talking about specific projects and even tearing that down a level to say, not only are we going to change the general plan for this property, but we're also going to consider a potential development plan? I suppose that's a distinction that I'd like to make sure is clear with that particular question.
Yeah, it would be simply the land use designation change and the zoning change which would arise from that. So not a particular development project. It would be the higher level, moving this from for example, a single family zone to a multifamily zone or a mixed use zone and the implications associated.
That's a critical distinction because there's a number of areas in our city that are public zones, for example, on either end of our city that are problematic for zoning and need attention. So anyway, great. Just wanted to set the table for that a little more clearly.
And there is a question in the Q&A that or somebody had a hand raised. I would ask that the member of the public actually type the question in the Q&A if you would please, Mr. Cleveland.
Yeah, Mr. Cleveland, if you could do that. And I wonder if there are opportunities within what we talked about this earlier today with economic development and, potentially could there be things that staff picks out as, certainly have been council priorities to say, oh, these two, catalytic sites would fall under what we've discussed, and that would be an appropriate use of funds as we were talking about, that then also wouldn't get us back into that prevailing wage discussion that we were having. So I don't know if that's even possible, but that comes up as an idea. Councilmember Borbo, followed by Commissioner Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, if I understand, the concept here is, we pay a little more, have this comprehensive, because I understand it has to be some sort of an EIR as part of the general plan update, but that the idea is you pay for a more extensive review to streamline future projects. The idea that's going to save, staff time, council time, and developer time and effort. That sounds appealing to me, even if there's an upfront investment in order to streamline things for future projects. But my question is, that sounds great, but EIRs, especially if there's any controversy around them, are highly subject to lawsuits. And how successful is the mechanism you're talking about in holding up against somebody saying, well, hey, you didn't require an EIR, and the city saying, oh, well, we did this thing as part of the general plan. We don't need an EIR. How successful is that to standing up to lawsuits?
That's a very difficult question, council member, to answer, but provided that the analysis is done well, and that it could easily withstand a challenge. As you may know, though, that CEQA lawsuits can be pretty capricious, and yes, the judges can be fairly capricious. So nothing could be guaranteed.
Well, that's why I asked. In other words, you put the money up front to think this is going to work, and then it in the end doesn't work. But I suppose it would work and save everybody time as long as it was a non-controversial project.
Right.
Okay. Thank
and
you.
So let's go to Commissioner Schmidt, and then we haven't seen Mr. Cleveland in the Q&A. I'm going to guess that maybe he's on a device where he can't get to the Q&A. So I would like to bring him on to make sure we hear what he has to say. So Commissioner Schmidt.
I'm very much in support of doing the analysis that's being discussed. And it's not specific analysis. It's for instance, I built a Home Depot on Los Osos Valley Road. So the general plan analysis looked at the traffic impacts of what were going to occur on Los Osos Valley Road with a commercial center where the Froome Ranch or where the Home Depot is and the other buildings. And so in that sense, it was very, very helpful for me and for the owner of the property to work the property. It's very friendly. We would be, as a community, looked at as very supportive of people and projects and things if we did do this.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Madam Mayor, do we need to alert IT to bring Mr. Cleveland in?
Yes, Luke, if you're available there, if you could bring in Mr. Cleveland. All right, Mr. Cleveland, I think your mic is on. Hi.
Oh, hi. How you guys doing? So my name is Eric Cleveland. I own the property at 100800 Atascadero Avenue. You may remember me. I went to the council 3 years ago asking for a general plan amendment. I was told to wait because you guys were going to be starting the new general plan update in a year or two. That was actually my second attempt. I tried also in 2016 to update and rezone the property. The property has city sewer, city water. It's close to Highway 101, and it borders everything else that's rezoned. So what I'm asking tonight is to hopefully you guys remember me in your council member or meeting January, I think, of 2019, and that the council considers independent requests as part of the overall general plan amendment or update.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. We absolutely are. We're not getting down into that level of detail tonight, but your property is on the list along with others. And so rest assured that you are remembered.
I just wanted to, because you guys were talking about there was 5 minutes left, and I'm like, no, I want to make sure that I am forefront on your mind right now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm seeing another individual. It's just numbers 553798. Let's go ahead and bring 553798 on.
Hey, this is Sean Knopf speaking here.
Hello.
Howdy. So I've got a couple properties that I've submitted applications for a zoning change. We'll talk about the first one is 5655 Capistrano property. My family and I have owned it since 1975. It's just above a half an acre, and it's currently zoned medium density. And we're requesting high density. The neighboring property is high density, and with the high density, it would allow me to build 4 units versus 2 units. Our property has all the utilities and sewer easily accessible. The location is ideal as it has schools, banking, shopping, movie theater, and public transit all within walking distance. Just a great location for high density. We also have another property that I submitted, 3105 El Camino. It's just under 2 acres. We requested multi-use or high density. The property has commercial business across the street. North and south of us has commercial, and just north of us is a new high density project. We feel the location is ideal for either mixed use or high density, as it has shopping, public transit within walking distance, utilities and sewer are easily accessible. And I think it's just a great location for a mixed use project. So that's my 2 properties. I didn't want to take up a lot of time.
Thank you, Mr. Knopf. We appreciate it. And you are also on the list. Again, we're not getting to that level of detail tonight, but you are on the list. And yes, absolutely. We will be looking at those things. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. All right, let me just see. I'm not seeing any other hands. And if there's any member of the public that wants to put something in the Q&A, please do that. Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, on the question of do we do this extra CEQA plan, I want to know how much extra does it cost to do it? What's the likelihood that we'll be able to expedite significant projects by doing so? And how well is it likely to hold up over time as projects emerge? Most of our significant sites, we have had to do specific plans or special or general plan amendments, sometimes more than once, as plans have changed on those sites. So if you end up having to, if we don't guess right the first time about how that zoning needs to be on that property, are we gonna, is it going to get us anything?
And Councilmember Funk, I apologize that we're not able to answer that specifically. I think the key thing would be that we would certainly be working to get the general plan designations right in terms of what the city's looking for and what the property owner is looking for the catalytic sites. So our hope would be that those are something that everybody desires occur. But as the question was raised earlier, is can we guarantee that there won't be a challenge? You can't do that. Anybody could challenge an EIR at any point in time, and you're never quite sure what the outcome will be. The best you can do is to do the best analysis and prepare for the best outcome.
Yeah, I love the idea in concept, but I'm not sure that it actually works for us. or that it's cost effective. That's where I am.
So just please do note that we have Ken from People Self-Help Housing did make a comment in there for us, but I think, Laura, what we would need to see, it sounds like we'd like to be able to do that if that makes us more, business friendly, and that's not quite the right term, but that we are able to offer something that makes it easier for some of the individuals who are on here tonight or businesses to come and do things here and get a process going quicker that not only benefits them but benefits the city. We're open to that. Yet what is the cost of that, and how helpful will that be? Is it something, as Councilmember Funk said, that becomes obsolete in 2 years, and 5 years down the line we're like, oh great, we spent $100 grand on that catalytic site and now it's no good.
Essentially, you're asking for a return on investment analysis on it. So that's something we could provide that additional information. Something that I do want to point out is that a number of years ago, the state implemented something in CEQA authorizing something called a master EIR, which would achieve what we're proposing. Those documents, Dan, I don't think we've really seen any ever really pan out. So nobody has used those to their intended purpose. But what we're describing in terms of using a general plan EIR to clear some projects have worked, but we need to get more information back to you on that in order for that decision to be made. Phil, you're nodding on that.
Yes, I think the best approach now would be for MIG to bring us some alternatives, some options along those lines about what those costs would be, what the implications would be. Just real quick from staff's perspective, I think to have a general plan update without updating the general plan map would be a huge lost opportunity. And not talking about getting into the project level, but talking about getting into the land use level where we've got some problematic land use districts or zoning areas that are well out of date. And that's one of the primary goals, I think, of this update. So
Laura, do you have enough direction from us to bring back the information we need to make those kind of decisions?
Yes, we need to provide some options back to staff, and it sounds like something we could work with staff. And by the time it comes back to council, there will be a recommendation in the work scope as to the course to take. And I think a recommendation, and then maybe part of the staff report will indicate the option based on the additional information we bring back.
Great.
We did have one last question. Madam Mayor, I'll leave it up to you if you want to explore this a little bit. We're a little past time here this evening, but the question is just there anything else that we should discuss or any other topics that you want us to hit on to make sure that we have all the direction we need to put together a scope for you. So I will leave that to you, Madam Mayor, as to how you want to respond to this SP assignment.
I think we've actually accomplished quite a lot in this 3-hour period. If I would, look to the 12 of us, if there are any of you that say, oh my gosh, there's this key thing I forgot I really need to talk about, then go ahead and do that and be brief. And all right.
I have a question.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Is MIG going to do the public draft and the final EIR, or some other consultant doing that work?
We have a team member, SWCA, a local firm, to prepare the environmental impact report. They are our team partner.
Councilmember Robo.
I would just suggest that, we have time to think about it, that we just email if we have something along the lines she's asking about, we email it to Phil or somebody and input it that way.
Perfect. Commissioner Carranza.
The EIR portion, would that mean that it's not on the interactive map as well, or it'd be a separate, like, oh, we're going to print this one, but the rest of it is interactive online? I'm just confused about the deliverable of it.
The EIR would not be an interactive document. That it would just be the general plan. The EIR would follow the normal course of EIR preparation that the state lays out. It is a public document in that there are a couple of opportunities for the public to weigh in before the EIR is prepared and identifying what issues need to be addressed. And then once the draft EIR is produced, the public has the opportunity to comment on the content of the EIR. At this point in time, there is not an electronic provision for that in the work scope. So I hope that responds to your question. There is one question in the chat, which for some reason, I don't see anymore. But there was a comment that having an EIR that streamlines projects is extraordinarily helpful, particularly for affordable housing projects and getting housing produced. So I did want to acknowledge that comment this evening.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I want to thank my colleagues. We've done a great job. We got so much accomplished, and thank you to Mig. You kept us focused where we needed to be, and staff for your input. We're a great team. Like it. Anything else that you want to say, Laura, before we adjourn?
No, I just really thoughtful comments from everybody, and we appreciate the passion. We appreciate the enthusiasm. We look forward to everybody participating as we move forward. And we're anxious to get underway.
Yeah, we are too. This is exciting. Long time in coming. So fabulous. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the members of the public who have spent the evening with us, and several of you this afternoon as well. We will now, the City Council will adjourn to its next regular session on February 8th, 2022. And of course, the Planning Commission will adjourn to its next regular session on February 1st, 2022. Bye, Abigail.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night, all.
Everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Go get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.